All right, what's going on? Drive time, Wednesday afternoon, about 14 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It's a chilly day outside, but it's sunny, and it is clear. It's about 45 degrees here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, on this Wednesday afternoon, and as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass today, producing the program as we get you halfway through your work week, and we get you one day closer to the weekend. Appreciate you making us a part of your day today. Got a lot to do on this Wednesday afternoon. Good guest list as well. Obviously, we will get to the latest edition of the CFP rankings. The CFP rankings, the college football rankings, the second iteration of the CFP rankings are out. Brigham Young comes in at number 6, which is about one spot higher than I thought they'd be, and we'll talk about what that means as BYU is still high speed ahead to the Big 12 championship game with a very large margin of error as a result of how they played so far and their ability simply just to figure it out week after week, just like they did last Saturday here in Salt Lake City as they took care of the University of Utah in a very dramatic game that, of course, we've been talking about all week. Wednesday is typically the day where we kind of start to turn the page a little bit. That's probably good news for Ute fans. We'll continue to kind of exist in the space of the rivalry game last Saturday a little bit on the program, but got to look ahead. Coach Witt, Kyle Whittingham coached a show last night. Sean O'Connell filling in for Riles as Bill was calling the Utah men's basketball game. We'll do a little college basketball on the show today. And Kyle talked about, the necessity of just simply looking ahead and trying to compartmentalize, staying in the moment, and working on what's going to be a really difficult game coming up Saturday against Colorado in Boulder. Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, certainly has that team in a really good spot. Both Colorado and Brigham Young essentially control their destiny to meet in Dallas for the Big 12 championship game. The spread to start things out was 10. Colorado was a 10-point favorite when the spread opened. It stayed pretty much level for about 48 hours. This morning it moved towards Colorado, 1.5 points. So either incrementally a lot of money coming in or maybe a couple of wise guys, a couple of sharks moving the lines. But Colorado as of now is an 11.5-point favorite. The over-under also took a pretty big dip to 45.5. That's probably as a result of the news that we kind of teased yesterday a little bit. We did talk about the potential of Brandon Rose suffering an injury that would keep him out for the year. Well, Kyle himself verified that last night. So it's Isaac Wilson's show. It's my guy, the Ferrari, Luke Batari, as the backup now, as Brandon Rose joins Cameron Rising on the sidelines after suffering a lower leg injury against BYU last Saturday. So a tough road trip for the Utes. You got to get 2 in the final 3 to go bowling. As I continue to say, the only thing worse than playing in a throwing away bowl game is not being eligible for one. On the BYU side of things, a tricky game coming up on Saturday night in Provo at LaVell Edwards Stadium as the Kansas Jayhawks roll into town for the first time ever. Kansas has never played football in Provo, so it'll be a first for them. The line moved the way of the Jayhawks last night. BYU, as we sit here today, this afternoon on a Wednesday, is a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under is 56.5, which is really, really high. Not sure that I would touch either of those lines. Kansas has been better as of late. Just an atrocious start to the year, but winning 2 of their last 3, and they nearly got K-State in Manhattan. They've really turned it around, started to play a little bit better. So, of course, we'll do some college football on the show today. Was down at the Delta Center last night for the NBA Cup because, we're all juiced for the NBA Cup. The Jazz are really bad. And it's going to be interesting to see how we can kind of cover this team all year long. Phoenix rolled into town with no Kevin Durant, and it was not an issue, not even kind of. Devin Booker was awesome. Walker Kessler did not play for the Jazz. Keontae George back after missing a game, back in the starting lineup, and it was rough, and it's going to be rough all year long. Wondering how their head coach is digesting all of this. When John Collins has been your best player all year, not a great look. But he is kind of like the perfect vet to have on this team because he makes a lot of money and he's pretty bad at basketball. And if the goal is losing, you need a John Collins on your side. So Jazz will be back in action coming up tomorrow against Dallas here in Salt Lake. We'll see if Luka decides to show up. We'll see if Kyrie decides to show up or Klay Thompson too. Dallas was in Golden State last night for what was a really entertaining game. Always, I'm a Clay guy. I've always been a Clay guy, so it was kind of fun to see him back home. Stephen Curry put on a show down the stretch with a personal 10-0 run, leading Golden State to a 120-117 win over the Dallas Mavericks. Anthony Richardson's getting his starting quarterback job back for the Colts. Fantasy football players, go pick him up right now, depending on the league that you play in. So, a lot to do on the show today. We are one day away from the start, believe it or not, of Week 11 in in pro football. You blink and the stuff kind of flies by you. And don't forget, we're your home of Thursday Night Football. So, it's going to be the Commanders and the Eagles. A little Jaden Daniels, a little Jalen Hurts. Philly, a 3.5-point favorite at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All right, good guest list today. We'll start things off NBA Daily Assist style with Zach Harper. We'll do a little Utah Hockey Club on the program today. It's our Behind the Glass weekly conversation with Neil Smith. The Hockey Club's in action tonight against Carolina. Really good Carolina team. Utah Hockey Club 500, 6-6-3. Carolina's 11-3. Chris Kamrani, typically a Friday staple. We'll stop by on Wednesday today, live in studio. We'll do a little sports court as well. So we'll bounce around, a little CFP playoff conversation, a little college football conversation, pro basketball, and the like with Zach Harper, Neil Smith, Chris Kamrani, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson. So during Crosstalk today, Sean and I hatched a brilliant plan where ESPN 700 is going to start a side hustle where we simply make men great again.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
I think we already have, discussed this on the afternoon show,
but bringing Sean on board is key because all you have to do is, in the past, having existed in some space where you can spin a tale where people can't really call you a liar, even though that you are. But Sean has won $1 million as a prize fighter. He's won a championship belt as a prize fighter. He's played college football. So we simply just say Sean is a college football American who had a cup of coffee in the pros. We don't need to say where.
Right.
This is how these guys do it. We need to say he was an undefeated prize fighter. The records online are fake news, and he won $1 million. And there's enough information out there where Sean now has the male credibility to help us kind of crack into this space that's very, very crowded, where you have to give these disenfranchised young men basic advice on how to live and maybe teach them how to sell on Amazon, and suddenly you're part of the charlatan community that basically steals money from them under the guise of things that you pretty much never did.
It's the former, remember, Division I quarterback convention guy. You're taking his angle. I like it.
Can you contact the AlphaCon guys to see if I can get a spot to speak this year, please?
I can send a message.
All right, send a message. So excited to announce our side hustle here today on ESPN 700. Zach Harper is going to be our first guest right out of the gates. But before we catch up with Zach, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too, at Standard Restaurant Supply. It's your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic at standardrestaurant.com or their location at 3500 South West Temple on a Wednesday. It's time for your opening tip. Second iteration of the CFP rankings released last night. Remember, the rankings are not the seeding. I see a lot of angry people online that see BYU as a 6th seed and say, well, they should be a top 3 or 4 seed. You can still be ranked 6th and be a top 3 or 4 seed, and they're probably going to. Now, yesterday, my guess was, last week I said probably 9, and they came in at 9. Yesterday I said probably 7. But to see them up at 6 is actually really good news if you're a BYU fan, because I do think that sends a message. I still think, the rest of the rankings are still a little bit of an indictment on the Big 12 as a whole. I mean, K-State comes in at 16, Colorado at 17, the most likely Big 12 championship matchup right now, according to ESPN's FPI, and Vegas as well, is Colorado and BYU. Colorado right now is actually the Vegas favorite to win the Big 12, but BYU, Colorado, your most likely matchup. But I think moving them up to 6, because, Georgia with their second loss, they fall all the way down to 12. And Miami, with their first loss, they fall all the way down to 9. But Miami has nearly been got like several times. They were kind of a paper tiger undefeated team. I know some people think BYU is too, but that doesn't matter because they're still undefeated. You know, if they lose a couple of down the stretch, maybe the haters will have a point. But as of now, BYU has answered every question thrown at them. And I think at 6, what's on the table is BYU as a one-loss team could actually make it in as an at-large team. Now, I do believe that one loss would have to be in the Big 12 championship game. I think for BYU to feel good, they're going to have to finish the season clean. And if they go into Dallas as a 12-0 team after beating Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston, I think today I feel pretty confident that they're going to the CFP even if they lose to, let's say, a Colorado. That's what last night sent to me. But, you know, every week it's going to be different. You know, this is not that far of a cry from the other CFP rankings, you know, that we've been following for years, whether it was the BCS back in the day. And the questions always remain the same. Like, what exactly do you value? Because ultimately, BYU, with their resume, could make a case that they should be a little bit higher. You know, they did move, the CFP committee moved BYU and Indiana up 3 spots for staying clean when neither team really played that well last week. I mean, I hate to say this as we're a mile away from Rice-Eccles Stadium. That would have been a really bad loss for BYU based off of Utah's resume this year. And Indiana had to sweat it out in the second half against Michigan. So I was really curious to see what they do with Indiana and BYU specifically, 2 teams that remained undefeated despite some mediocre performances over the weekend. CFP moves them up 3 spots to 3. Indiana's at 5. There are 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5. So what do you do with some of these SEC teams? Georgia might be playing for their lives coming up this weekend. This could be an elimination game for the Georgia Bulldogs, who have the number 1 strength of schedule in college football. And they've got to play Tennessee coming up on Saturday to stay alive in this thing. Now, it is between the hedges. It's down in Athens. And Georgia's a 10.5-point favorite. Tennessee's number 7 right now. Georgia's number 12. Tennessee with 1 loss. Georgia has 2. And I know we hear a lot about a 3-loss SEC team kind of squeaking in. As we say there today, I don't see that, but I certainly could be wrong. But there are plenty of people that still believe Georgia is the best team in college football. They just have played such a ridiculously hard schedule. They pretty much have played all the tough teams, but their losses are in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and then at Ole Miss last week. And they've got that win at Texas, which might be the best win in all of college football. They started things off with a neutral site win over Clemson. But they've got to take on Tennessee. And then the SEC is going to do what the SEC does every year. For whatever reason, week like 14, 15, they all schedule these cakewalks. Georgia's going to have UMass at home. They'll finish with Georgia Tech. But this is kind of their last chance to make a statement to the committee that they belong in the top 12, even though most people believe they might be the best team in college football. But they have 2 losses. So they're going to be fighting for their lives coming up over the weekend. But if you're a BYU fan, I think last night was actually good news. I know you see the online stuff where BYU fan believes they should be one of the top 3 teams in the country. So stop that. That's ridiculous. But ultimately, I think 6 is a little bit higher than I was expecting, most people expecting. And I do think it's high enough that if you enter the Big 12 championship game as an undefeated team, I do think no matter what, you're still getting in. But only time will tell. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, I want to tell you about my friends at Diamond Coat. Diamond Coat Premium Home Siding. They're new here along the Wasatch Front. You won't believe what they can do to your home's exterior. Diamond Coat Siding Next Generation System delivers the exterior transformation you deserve to level up to the neighborhood standard. They're the total design solution that shows your personal style with endless styles and colors for limitless customization, and their 30-year no-fade warranty means your vision will last for decades to come. Designed beyond limits, beyond expectations with Diamond Coat, now available in the Salt Lake City area. Premium home siding, limitless potential, endless styles and colors. They're your total design solution, year-round weather-ready, durable in all seasons, which, of course, is important in Utah. Discover more at diamondcoatsiding.com. That's Diamond Coat, spelled K-O-T-E, siding.com. Zach Harper bats leadoff on a Wednesday on ESPN 700. All right, you do realize now at this point, we're 30 minutes into the show. And if you count crosstalk, the two bumps that I've heard so far are Papa Roach and now Pitbull. I've got 4 hours ahead of me to do. What are you setting me up to fail?
I claim no responsibility for the Papa Roach thing. And Zach Harper can take responsibility for this one. So,
well, I know Zach's on the show, so I mentally and emotionally prepared myself for the worst bump that we play all week. But on the heels of the Papa Roach, the compound interest isn't sitting well. Zach, happy Wednesday. How are you?
I'm great. Can you just do me one favor when it comes to this stuff, okay?
All right. What is it?
Don't stop the party.
Okay. All right. That's enough. That's enough. But Zach, I want to start our interview today with some really good news, and I want to see if you are interested in joining the ESPN 700 the ESPN 700 side hustle has been created because our midday host is a guy named Sean O'Connell, and I think guys like you and I, we've been waiting for a guy like Sean to help us launch our business. Sean is a former college football player. And he's also a championship MMA fighter. He won a belt and $1 million. And he's agreed to use these things that he's accomplished as part of our platform to join the manosphere to help young men become better men. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean that feels like that could go a lot of different directions.
Well, ultimately, if we're doing this as a society, then we need a piece of it. Okay, we need a piece of it. We got to jump on the train or get off board. So things, like really good, solid advice, because Sean's pedigree will allow us to attract a legion of young men when we can tell them to take cold plunges, drink black coffee, live with gratitude. Maximize your potential. I don't know. I just wanted to kind of spitball some other pieces of advice we could use on our new platform.
Yeah, I wonder if here's something that I've been trying to get off the ground for a little bit as I've noticed this shift in the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Could everyone just be bleeping normal for once? Could we try that as a society? Could we just chill out and just try to relax and get through life? Or is that too much? Do we just have to be extreme in everything we do now?
Oh, somebody hasn't taken the red pill.
That would be my coaching, is just relax. This whole idea that, life's a movie, I'm main character energy, all that stuff. No, you're an accountant. You're like a business owner. You're a basketball writer. None of this is a movie. Just get through life and let's enjoy basketball or enjoy whatever our vices are within reason.
Somebody hasn't been red pilled.
I don't. Is that Tylenol? I don't know what the red pill is, but I don't take a lot of painkillers.
You had to have seen this stuff floating around where it's the alpha bros teaching all these young men how they can maximize their potential. I just figured you'd want a piece of the pie, Zach. That's all.
I try to live by this rule, right? Because there are people who want to want you to know that they're smart, or want you to know that they're funny, or want you to know that they're alphas and all this stuff. And I feel like the people who actually are those things never have to tell anybody.
So just one follow-up. It sounds to me that you have no interest in defying the cultural elite that has destroyed your life. You have no interest?
That is a sequence of words that I do not understand them in that order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
okay.
Sure, maybe. I don't know. Do I have to – can I wear sweats?
Beta.
If I can wear sweats, I'll do just about anything.
Beta. All right, Zach. We can move on because, look, yesterday I woke up with an extra pep in my step, and I realized it was time for the NBA Cup. It's a big deal. Went down to the Delta Center. The courts are cool. I guess. I don't know. What's the level of excitement here now that the NBA Cup is back?
The courts are better than they were last year. There's not that weird runway. I don't know if you saw any of the games that had non-gray courts, but the blue ones and the green ones are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They look insane on TV. The gray ones, were fine. Those are fine, but I'm in. I'm throwing myself into this NBA Cup. I'm super into it. I'm here to celebrate it. I'm here to try to make it more of a thing because I do believe it breaks up, kind of the monotony of the first half of the season, and maybe you shouldn't have that in the first half of the season. But it's funny, like I see all these people, and look, if I'm about to offend anybody, get over it. I think anyone discussing awards at this point is just out of ideas. Like, it's just out of ideas, right? Like, we're not even at Thanksgiving. People are like, is this person higher on your MVP ladder? I was like, I don't have an MVP ladder. Like, it's November. Like, that doesn't exist to me until maybe mid-January. And so I feel like once we get past the first couple of weeks of the season, and it's like, all right, I think this team's good, or all right, that team hasn't lost yet. This is good. I think we then get into just like, all right, well, it's going to be a while until Christmas, and it's going to be a while until the trade deadline. And I think this breaks this up perfectly. I don't know that everyone is bought in who's playing in it yet, but I like it. Like, I'm in on this.
Well, it's certainly, and I've always liked this about pro basketball, and sometimes they don't get it right, sometimes they do, but at least they'll try new things, and that's one of the things I've always liked about the NBA, and I think Adam Silver is a forward-thinking, front-facing commissioner in a way that David Stern maybe wasn't, and we could debate, which approach is better. But I wanted to get from you, like, when you talk to people around the league, is there buy-in with this, players, coaches, teams, or is it still kind of like this weird new thing that people are trying to put their arms around?
Yeah, I don't think it's universally bought in yet from what I can see. I think there are some people who are like, yes, this is great. And there's some people like, this just feels like another game on a court. I think once you get into this position of the teams who do advance to the single elimination tournament portion of it, I think that's when it takes off. I think that's when people are bought in because they're like, okay, trip to Vegas, extra money, all this stuff. But until that happens, I still think the group play is a foreign concept to a lot of the people participating.
So went down to the game last night, and the Suns were without Kevin Durant, which didn't matter at all. Really wasn't all that uncomfortable. Booker got going in the fourth, and obviously he's a tough cover. Grayson Allen hit like 3 straight threes at one point. Phoenix rolls the Jazz 120 to 112. The building continues to be full. I don't have anything interesting really to ask you about the Jazz outside of, as we'll continue to kind of try to understand whether or not these young players are coming along for the ride. And one of the undeniable bright spots has been Kyle Filipowski. After Taylor Hendricks went down, it opened up about 30 minutes or so. And for the most part, Will has elected to go with younger players. Now, not every single game. Like John Collins played 34 minutes. If you want to know where we're at, John Collins has probably been the best player on the team this year. That sentence is kind of all you need to know. But
that's crazy.
Filipowski, 18 points, 6 boards, a couple assists, 2 blocks, and I had a really good seat, so I was watching him pretty closely. He matches up with the physicality, certainly in NBA basketball. I mean, late pick, certainly. Is there a chance maybe they found a diamond in the rough here with Kyle Filipowski playing well early on?
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to not have any bias in this because I just going into the draft after I thought last year at Duke he was terrible. Like, I really did. Like, I just was, this is not the prospect we thought he was going to be. And yeah, I thought he underperformed. I thought he played soft. I thought he wasn't prepared to be a big man in the NBA. And I'll admit, I've been impressed. I didn't think he would play this well over the last week or so. And I do think there's something there. I think maybe last season at Duke aside, I do think maybe we should look at the whole of all right, he was pretty highly regarded in high school and first moments at Duke looked pretty good. And last year, really, really struggled just in terms of looking like he was progressing. But you get him in the NBA system, you get him with his Jazz coaching staff, and yeah, I can't deny that he's looked really good. I'm still not buying it just because I want to see more. It's such a small sample size, but it's been, at least for someone who didn't think much of the pick at the time, it's very encouraging so far.
So look, I just there's nothing to talk about with the Jazz. I can't, in good faith, continue to ask you about
Cooper Flag.
Well, no, it's a long way of me getting exactly to where you just landed. I could keep asking you why Keontae can't make shots because he continues to shoot horribly for the most part. He'll have a good game here or there, but we keep talking about Cooper Flag and we keep talking about the potential of maybe that actually happening and Lady Luck shining on Salt Lake in a way that it never has. And there's no guarantee here. There's no guarantee ever. I mean, ask Detroit. Atlanta, I think, had the 10th odds. They move up to 1. So the underlying fear here is a fan base who has been spoiled, never have had a championship, but usually the rebuild here goes 2 years, maybe 3, and then they're kind of back to going in the right direction. They're really bad. And seeing it up close last night, I'm like, dude, it's going to be such a long year. And the permeating fear is they go through this and then the ping pong balls pop up and it's like 7 or 8, right? But if it is 1, and if it is Cooper Flagg, what are you hearing from scouts who actually know exactly who they think this kid could be? Should he land in Salt Lake, what sort of player, fully baked, will Cooper Flagg make in the NBA?
I mean, I don't think we're looking at like a Zion situation, right? Like, I don't think you're looking at a dominant player in the traditional sense of like, get that guy the ball 30, 40 times a game, get out of the way. I don't like, maybe his game gets to that, but I think we saw the good and the bad of Cooper Flagg last night in that, yeah, there were times where he was just completely overwhelming. And then you get to end a game situations like, hey, Cooper, go create. And like, yeah, his handle's weak. His jump shot form is not clean, right? Like there's a lot to clean up within his game, but defensively, he's a monster. I mean, I've kind of been, discussing this with people and I've come to the conclusion of, I think he's, white Sean Marion with more of a knack for scoring. Right. And people are like, oh, but that's still a really good player. I was like, yeah, I'm not saying he's going to be a bust. I just don't think he's going to be, as of what we've seen so far, I don't think he is this like absolute number one on a championship team. Like you see that progression, you see all that. And I'm not saying it can't get there. Like he can develop a ton. He's super talented. He's super athletic. He's got great instincts for the game. There are just certain ball skills that he doesn't have cleanly that at the college level that I look at the NBA level and I'm like, if he can't really cleanly dribble into a jump shot, what does that look like? Right? Like, what are you creating there? The good news is that, all right, let's say they don't get one. It's like 5 or 6 dudes, right? So it's a deep pool for trying to get a franchise guy. I'm actually, I'm going to butcher his name. The big kid from the Sudan. Maluak, or I can't remember how to say his name, but to me, I look at this and I'm like, all right, this reminds me a little bit of 2014 where we had Andrew Wiggins, we had Jabari, we had Gordon, we had Dante Exum, we had all these dudes, right? And then Embiid, who was a highly regarded prospect but still very raw, ended up being the guy. And I'm not saying he's going to be Embiid, but it kind of reminds me of that of like you have all these guys that are like, yep, that guy's really good at this, that guy's really good at that. But this guy's so raw and so big and so athletic and still has skills. I wonder if he's going to end up being the best player.
Yeah, and Embiid was 4, I think. I think he was the 4th pick, if I remember that correctly, in that draft, something like that. And certainly ended up
maybe
being
3rd, yeah,
something like that. Yeah. So let's expand the conversation because the fact of the matter is, unless Cooper Flagg is awesome day 1 next year, they're still so far away, right? And so if you look at their books, I mean, essentially after next year, Collins, breaking news, John Collins has a player option for $27 million. He's going to go ahead and snag that. They've got.
You think he's going to pick that up?
I would love it if he didn't. To be like, dude, I just had a baller year for a team that won 9 games. Okay, sign me to a long-term deal. But my guess is he's snagging that. They've got 1 more year with Sexton, 1 more year with Clarkson. The long-term contracts are all the young guys. It's Hendricks, it's Williams, it's Keontae. It's Filipowski, Walker Kessler, Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier. So they've got all their young players. You want to throw Johnny Juzang in there? Fine. Spot up shooter, money. All those guys are under contract for at least the next 4, some 5 years, depending on options and such. So let's have fun here on a Wednesday because Jazz fans are depressed and say Lady Luck shines on the Jazz. Throw a Cooper Flagg next to Lauri Markkanen, who is the only long-term piece built in. And then you bring back all the young pieces. You do the thing where you figure out what you have. They're still probably not close. So how long do you think, generally speaking, Jazz fans should expect this team to continue to lose games intentionally to try to find talent? So at some point, yes, they are ready to at least compete for a playoff spot. How long do you think this is going to take?
I mean, from all accounts, like the 2026 draft might be loaded too, right? Like you've got the Boozer twins, but I mean, there's a bunch of dudes in that class who look like they could have real high potential. And so I think the Jazz most likely will be really bad this year going into this 2025 draft, right? As we've seen, I don't think there's some big turnaround happening. And then I would expect them to be better next year, but still very young and losing games in frustrating ways. Hopefully not getting blown out, but yeah, like I think it's two more seasons, counting this season as one of those, of what to expect. But that's, you're right. Like Jazz fans are spoiled in the sense of like, they don't really have downtimes, right? They have a year or two here and there, but they don't really have you're probably looking at between the last two seasons where it was, all right, this is fine. There's some talent here, to this season and probably next season going, wow, these tickets are expensive for such a bad team. Like, yeah, you're probably going through that. But I would expect, right after the 2026 summer, this team should be primed and ready to like really ascend, almost maybe in kind of what we've seen from Houston the last year and a half.
Yeah, Scott Layden, Kevin O'Connor, and Dennis Lindsey all masterfully worked their way through a very quick space of a rebuild to at least get you. And look, I was never a huge fan of the whole like Al Jefferson situation where,
Right.
you give him the ball for 48 minutes and he can get you, 26 points and 18 boards. But that team was never going anywhere. But, Scott Layden, and then Kevin O'Connor. And then Dennis Lindsey was the one who decided to break that team down. And the last time we were kind of dealing with a team like we have now was that 2013-2014 year, which was Ty Corbin's final season and Dennis Lindsey's first real season taking over from Kevin O'Connor. And that year, it was kind of the same thing where they brought in some overpriced vets just to make sure they're following the rules to pay players, guys like Andres Biedrins and Marvin Williams, Richard Jefferson at the end of his career, Brandon Rush. But then, Trey Burke didn't work out. Alec Burks he's still in the league. He's had a good career. Derek Favors worked out. Ennis Cantor, now known as Ennis Freedom, was on the roster. Never fully baked. Gobert was a rookie. We know what happened there. Gordon Hayward, of course, on that team. We know what happened there. So it was kind of like a similar thing. But within a year or two, even losing Hayward, they draft Mitchell. Gobert kind of grows, and suddenly they're back to 45, 50 wins. And that took about 2 or 3 years. So This is the first time, Zach, and I've been around this team since the 80s, right? This is the first time where I think in the past we can look at this and say this has taken 2 or 3 years. It's already been 2. This is year 3. It's probably 3 more years. This is going to be the first time that it'll be like a 6-7 year hole. Now, it happens in a lot of places, so I'm not painting that it will only happen here. But is that more of a indictment on the new leadership, or is it more of a commentary on how to build a roster in the modern day NBA in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, I don't think it's commentary on the new leadership. I think they're doing we've talked about this a bunch of you should have sold out the year before, right? Like you should have just bailed on any wins and gone after Wemby. And you can make the argument of like, yeah, but look at Detroit and look at these teams where they tried that and didn't work. It's like, yeah, but look who San Antonio tried it and it worked. Right? Like San Antonio wasn't trying to win games the year before Wemby. They knew like, all right, we got a 14% chance or whatever it is at this kid. That's good enough for us. And so that's my only criticism of them is they let pride get in the way for that one season. But I think like they're doing smart things. They acquire picks. They're drafting well. Like they're not drafting stars, but they're drafting guys where you'd be like, yeah, that guy should be in the rotation for 10 years, 12 years, right? And so I think it's just part of it is bad timing. And I know that's a very unsatisfying, answer for this stuff because it can't really be explained or fixed. But sometimes, like, you just miss out on a trade, or you just miss out on a draft pick, or you just miss out on a lottery chance, and that's part of rebuilding. And I don't think you're talking like, yes, this thing gets pushed maybe to 5, 6, 7 years of an actual rebuild. But I don't think you're 20 wins a season in those, every year for those 5. Like, I think it's, maybe 9 this year, like you said, and then it's, 20, and then it's 28, and then it's 34. And by like the third year of that, you see it, and it's like, yeah, this team's competing for a play-in tournament. I also don't know that you look at the landscape of the West, and it's crazy this year. I don't know that it's crazy every year moving forward. Things change so dramatically and so rapidly in this league that the landscape that the Jazz are facing in 2 years in the West might look, pretty easy compared to thinking you've got, 13 teams ahead of you right now.
So I thought last night was maybe, and I haven't watched, with this job in this sport, or excuse me, this job in this market right now. It's a lot of football, a lot of college football. So I've watched a lot of Jazz and then some other marquee games. I haven't watched every single NBA game, not even close, but in a vacuum, I think the scene in Golden State last night with Klay coming back and Steph being Steph was probably the marquee NBA game of the early calendar so far. I've always been a Klay guy. Don't know how you're not, but I wonder how you kind of digested that scene and then Steph doing Steph things down the stretch, which is always so much fun to watch.
It was cool, man. Like, it was pure entertainment, right? Like, I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't care about the Mavs. I don't care about the Warriors. I appreciate the good players on the team. I want those teams to be successful because I think that it is good for the league when teams with these types of stars are successful. But ultimately, if they don't make the playoffs, it's no skin off me. Like, I think it's going to be fine. And so watching last night, I thought the Warriors, and you kind of knew they were going to do this, but I thought the Warriors did just a first-class job of welcoming Klay back, right? Like, didn't try to play it cool. Like, no, you mattered to us. You still matter to us, and we want you to know that, right? And so they love bomb him and all this stuff, and then he comes out and he plays great, and he played great in the fourth quarter, and they build a 7-point lead and a 6-point lead with like 3 minutes left, and then it's just Steph, man. Like, I thought Klay's comment afterwards, talking about being on the other side of the flurry for once, and ending it with like, but yeah, on the other side of it, it sucks. It's like, it's a fun reminder of just, like Steph is that guy. Like, we all, one of my favorite Klay quotes ever was, this was years ago, and someone had asked him as Curry was like really taken off, he's such a humble guy, and and Klay just cut him off and was like, you see the shots he takes? Like, there's nothing humble about that, right? Like, it's just such a great line, and to like watch him process that, watch him do the shimmy, Steph shaking his head, Steph, hits him with the night and everything. Like, that's just like, that's basketball. That's the NBA and entertainment, and we can get so cynical and granular about all this stuff. But ultimately, like, if you love basketball, last night was one of the best shows you could have in the regular season.
What has Denver figured out, at least for now? I mean, I hesitate to really buy into what they've been doing as of late, because we do see a positive effect of Russell Westbrook on their bench for now, and Christian Brown is playing a lot better. But I've been out on Westbrook for a long time when it comes to having him on your team to play winning basketball, and come playoff time, he still thinks he can shoot it from three. Like, if any coach could be like, dude, just don't do that. Please just don't do that. And you can do some other things. Maybe at some, but no, I've been saying this for 6 years. Like, he still thinks he's the ball dominant MVP from OKC, and he's not. But they have won 5 straight to get back on track, including some good wins over the Thunder and the Mavs and such. Have they figured something out here?
Look, they were probably always going to beat Miami, but they played a Miami team that, 6 minutes in, Butler got hurt, right? Like, so now they're on the flat. Like, that's not a very good team without Jimmy Butler. 2 good wins there, but they've kind of barely been winning. They barely beat the Raptors twice, right? Like, they struggled against a team that I think is 2-10. But they did get wins. I mean, it's Jokic, man. Like, Jokic is just unreal. Like, they're dealing with injuries. Aaron Gordon's out. Jamal Murray had a concussion for a couple of games. I actually thought Russ played pretty decently in those games. Michael Porter Jr.'s turned around a little bit. As you mentioned, Christian's turned around a little bit. Michael Malone has actually let Peyton Watson play, which is weird. You're probably your best defender with Aaron Gordon out, comes in and makes some clutch plays. What a novel idea to have him on the floor. But, man, like, Jokic is on this crazy tear. He's hitting like 58% of his three-pointers, and he's that good. They can't defend at all, but their offense is gold right now, and so that's what's working right now.
All right, before I set you loose, and I asked you this last week, so I'm going to pose it in a different way. The only Cavs game I've seen so far is the win they had over the Warriors, and Donovan was actually not good that night. It was more of like Darius Garland played really well, so did Evan Mobley. Ty Jerome came off the bench and couldn't miss. But you look at Donovan's numbers, and he's been doing what Donovan does in the regular season. And those of us that are out here and watch Donovan have some good moments in postseason, it's incorrect to say that he's never played well in the playoffs. That's not correct. But there have also been so many moments when there's so much on the line where he just puts blinders on. What are you willing to say about what you think maybe Cleveland can do come playoff time? Because, yes, 12-0 is impressive, and Donovan knows this. He said it last year when they lost in the playoffs again. He's like, at some point I got to break through. And he is such a talent that you do leave space for maybe that potential learning curve to take place. What are you willing to say today about who Cleveland could be come playoff time?
I mean, I think they can get to the conference finals. I don't know how much of that is them and how much of that is just a weak Eastern Conference that, who knows if the Sixers get it together and who knows if the Bucks get it together, and those are two teams we're counting on. I'm not convinced that Cleveland is better than New York in a 7-game series. I don't think I think it would still be a quick out against Boston for them, but their offense looks great. They're shooting the lights out. I don't know if the shooting is sustainable for them. That's the big question. If those shots don't fall, then what does it look like? I love what they're doing with Evan Mobley, though. I love what Kenny Atkinson has done with Evan Mobley. Like he's using him more. He's using him more almost as a point big man, and he's making good decisions. He's been such a monster defensively, and it's good to see Darius Garland back to playing at an all-star level. This could be the start of them being the new Celtics with how they play. They could also be, the Hawks or, earmuffs to this Jazz fans, or the Jazz from a few years ago where they're killing the regular season and then it just falls flat in the postseason. I didn't really answer your question. I don't know what to expect out of them, but I do like what I'm seeing right now.
Yep, fair enough. All right, man, appreciate the time. NBA Cup time. Try to control your emotions, and if you have any other advice, are you taking a cold plunge tonight?
Cold plunge,
okay.
And I'm eating nothing but raw liver.
That a guy. And set the house to 62 degrees when you go to sleep. Remember that.
Oh, I don't know if I can have it that hot.
Fair enough. Thanks for the time, dude. Chat soon.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it.
Zach Harper, part of our side hustle. Okay, every segment during the break, Porter, I want you to think about one piece of advice, because now that we have Sean on board, that's a game changer.
It's a big game changer.
I mean, you and I, we can't. I set the record for 3-pointers made in 1994 in my junior. I don't have.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, but that's not gonna draw in young men. Sean, look, and here's what you do in today's day and age. You know what? I actually played summer league basketball for the Boston Celtics.
There you go.
Prove I didn't. That's what I thought.
Okay.
So what we can do with Sean is essentially all-American college football player, real-life warrior, if you've ever seen the movie. Announcer, goes into the ring, wins the belt, $1 million. Signed a free agent contract with the 49ers, didn't work out. These are the things.
He's really smart, too. He's a writer.
That's what I'm saying.
I think his IQ is 210.
So now that we have him on, and you know what? Bump that up, 230.
There you go.
I'm a very stable genius. This is what you can do now. You just say it. It doesn't matter. We start an Instagram account, okay? Maybe TikTok, right? And we find a way to go viral, right? And then we are able to co-opt the thoughts of young men that are disenfranchised with life. They give us money. We give them the same boilerplate, boring advice all these other alpha bros are giving them, and we just get our piece of the pie. If we're doing this as a country, I want a piece of it.
I don't hate the angle, and I understand there's a big demand for it for some reason. I'm gonna get in here on the business side of it.
Okay.
And I'm gonna start selling you raw meat, right?
Perfect.
I got the livestock side handled down. We've got raw meat, cold plunges, saunas.
Teach you how to sell on Amazon?
I'm not going to go there, but there's going to be someone on staff for that.
All right, so every segment, we're going to have a couple of pieces of advice to make men great again on the show today, on a Wednesday. Sean on board is a game changer. All right, we'll do a little hockey coming up on the other side with Neil Smith. Chris Camerani's live in studio. Do a little sports court later on. We got a lot to do on a Wednesday. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. We got CK live in studio today. Chris Camerani will stop by for an hour. We'll do a lot of rivalry game stuff with Chris. We'll do a lot of college football stuff with CK. He has been to Boulder a few different times to do stories on Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. So we'll get a little preview of Utah, Colorado, do a little BYU, Kansas. We'll go in that direction. We have Sports Court later on. And then we'll go until 6 on a Wednesday. Utah Hockey Club tonight. The Carolina Hurricanes are in town. It is a non-conference matchup. Carolina's very good. They're 11-3. They're 6-2 on the road. Utah Hockey Club, after a really, really good start, they're 3-10 in their last 13 games. And our next guest stops by on a weekly basis to inform us of the happenings around the National Hockey League. Neil Smith on a Wednesday. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. No sinus infection this week, so I'm much better than last week, Spence. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. There you go. I'm thrilled to hear that, because those things can put you on your back. So tell us about this Carolina Hurricane team that's in town tonight. Record's very good. High-powered offensive team. They're very good on the road, where they're 6-2. What should our hockey fans know about Carolina, the Utah Hockey Club's opponent this evening?
Well, I think the fans just need to sit down, strap in, and watch some very good hockey players that play for Carolina, and it's a real good team. I mean, there's no getting away from it. Martin Neckish, who's a right winger for them, is third in scoring in the entire league. He's already got 8 goals and 16 assists in 14 games. And you know what? You said it before. They're very deep offensively. They're very good. Shvetnikov, 14 points. Sebastian Aho, the number 1 center on their team, 13 points. I can go on and on. Gostas Bear, the defenseman that they have at the point, has got 9 points already. They're a really good offensive team. And their goaltender, who's going to play tonight, Checketts, is 8-1-0, 2.45 goals against average, and a .902 save percentage, which is number 3 in the entire NHL. So it's going to be a tough game. There's no getting around it. There's a very good hockey team. But for the fans, they're going to get to see one of the very best teams in the National Hockey League.
So, I hate to sound like a broken record, but, the issues for the Utah Hockey Club seem to continue to really be defensively, where Connor Ingram's asked to stand on his head every night. And he has not had – and look, it's so early. It's only – he's played 12 games total. But statistically, he's not near in the stratosphere he was a year ago. And as we continue to talk about, it seems like the defensive issues are what plagued him last year. Injuries notwithstanding, tell me why you think we're sitting here with a hockey team that's gone 3-10 in their last 13 games.
Well, I think it starts with those defensemen that got injured. You had 2 real good defensemen, Dursey and Marino. Both are gone, and they had to make up for that, and that hurts. And I don't think that the goaltenders have played as well as they can. You're going to get Vejmelka tonight. He's playing. It's not Connor Ingram. And Vejmelka's record, as you know, is not great, and he's got to pull a rabbit out of his hat and stand tall against a Carolina team that will test the Utah Hockey Club very much. So I think Connor Ingram is a good goaltender. I said that at the beginning of the season. I'm not going to back off of that. I don't think he's had a great start, but one of the things that the hockey club is missing is a couple of really strong defensemen that are out of the lineup for them. So everybody gets injuries. You got to play around them. You got to win, even though you're banged up. All the teams in the NHL go through it. So Utah's going to have to go through it as well.
The only areas where the Utah Hockey Club are among the league leaders are penalties and penalty minutes, where they're top 10 and top 5. Is this because Coach Torney talked about this post game the other night, where he feels like they're just playing a little bit too undisciplined, and the numbers would say that. Is that a result of just a young team trying to figure it out? Why do you think both the penalties and the penalty minutes have been so sky high for the Utah Hockey Club this year?
Well, I think there's frustration too that comes into this with players. When you have injuries and you have people not playing as well, and you start to lose. And you just said the record, 3-10 in the last 13. There's a lot of frustration that builds up with the players because they want to win so badly. And so sometimes they will take undisciplined penalties to get some of that anger out of them on the ice, and that is probably where it's coming from. And they have to learn to control that. They have to learn to control that undisciplined play, because at the where they're at with the holes in the lineup and everything, they can't go and give the other teams another advantage by being a man short. So it is a young team. It is a team that's going to have to learn to stay disciplined in these tough situations, and not let your emotions bubble over.
They're 22nd now in goals per game at 2.73, and they're 25th in power play percentage at 15.4. So it really, Neil, isn't just the defensive issues. They've also gone relatively cold after a red-hot start when it comes to just finding the back of the net, when it seemed like every night it was 4, 5, 6, 7 goals. But 25th in power play percentage, 22nd in goals per game. What do you make of the other side of the Utah Hockey Club kind of drying up after that really fast start?
Yeah, it was a really fast start, and they got. I mean, look, Dylan Guenther is a great goal scorer for them, and a great player, and has had a great start. You've heard me talk about Clayton Keller, the captain. He's got 13 points already this season. He's a real good player. I like Bukestad. I like Schmaltz. I like Logan Cooley. These guys are going to come around. They're going to get their points. They're going to get their goals. But these are the growing pains you got to go through. And I don't have a crystal ball to tell you exactly why they're not scoring and why their power play isn't working. I can only think that the coaches will be working on the power play, because that is something that is coachable, unlike most parts of hockey, which is, as you know, Spence, it's just it's spur of the moment. You got to do what your instincts tell you to do properly. In the power play, it's a setup, and you should be able to develop at least an average to good power play. The same with the penalty killing. It's all in the technique and the coaching. So I think it'll come around for them. I believe in their players. I think they got good players, and I said to you, and I'll continue to say it, I think that they're going to hang around that wild card spots to try to get in there. And right now, that's where they are. They're hanging right around. They're only a point behind Colorado, who with a game in hand. So there's no doom and gloom here, and I know you're not saying that. I'm saying there is no doom and gloom. They're still very much in this thing to get into the playoffs. It's really early. They're only 15 games in, but it's going to be a work in progress, and it's an 82-game schedule.
Just made a statement that kind of spawned something in my head to ask you a question this way, because for our listeners, Neil built some of the best hockey teams in pro hockey in the 90s, including one that won a Stanley Cup in 1994. So from your seat, as a former executive, when you're watching the team that you built play, what are the elements, as you just referenced, that you feel like you can directly tie to, okay, that's coachable, and what are the elements that you can directly tie to, okay, we don't have the players that we need? What's the line like between those two dynamics?
Well, I think that you watch the games carefully, you consult with your coaches, but you've got enough experience that you come up with your own opinion. And if you see breakdowns in certain parts of the ice, if you don't have if somebody that you expected would give you better offense up front, when you put the team together and they're not coming through for you, you know that you're going to have to make some kind of an adjustment there. And the same on the back end. If you have a defenseman that you felt was going to be steady and is not being steady, and they're getting scoring chances all the time when he's on the ice, you're going to have to make adjustments there. Maybe look for somebody else, or maybe move somebody into place. And then you get to the goaltending, which is the backbone of the team, and you give the goaltenders their chance to prove to be what you thought they were going to be, and you always have in your mind who's your number one and who's your backup, and how you base it upon what they have done so far in their career. And that's when you make those judgments as the season goes along. And you can't wait too long, obviously, or the season will get away on you, but you can't make rash decisions either. You've got to take your time and evaluate things.
And as you referenced earlier, this is not near the time to panic, but as you've learned probably as now a podcaster and a member of the media, you just try to figure out what the stories are that are compelling to the listeners. And Bill Armstrong has been steadfast from day one, quite frankly, to let the community know this is a rebuild. and here's where we're at in the rebuild, and we feel like we're on track to kind of stick with our plan. So no part of me believes Bill is looking at some wholesale change at all, Coach Torney or the roster. I'm not implying that. I'm just saying from a roster builder perspective, at what point in the season, if the struggles continue, do you start to say, okay, we have $8.5, $9 million in money. We have a bunch of draft capital. We have the ability to kind of reshape this roster if we want to. At what point, from a roster construction standpoint, do those conversations start to take place if the struggles continue?
I think you take your time. You know, our next benchmark is coming up here real soon, which is Thanksgiving. That's usually always a benchmark for everybody. That's about the 20-game mark, and that's one quarter of the way through the season. And then you're going to look at perhaps around Christmas time or around the All-Star break to see where you're at with it then, and you're going to make judgments as to what your own expectations are, and are you fulfilling those, and are you on course in your master plan? And the bad teams change their plan. The good teams stick with the plan. No matter how hard it is, they stick with their plan. And I think Bill Armstrong will stick with his plan. Now, their plan may include wanting to be in the playoffs this season. If it is, then they may make a trade or two or do something to upgrade to get into the playoffs in their first year in Salt Lake City. Or they may say, you know what, getting into the playoffs will hurt our rebuild, because what's the good of, giving away a young player or trading a draft pick just to get into the playoffs, to get eliminated in the first round, which will defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do here. We're better off just to bite the bullet. So that will be a judgment that they'll make at different times as the season goes on.
All right, I wanted to ask you about a couple of teams just kind of out in our neck of the woods when it comes to the division as a result of, where we land and who this club will be competing with. And I just have to keep asking you about Winnipeg, because they just keep, getting results night in and night out. And I don't think anybody, and you correct me if I'm wrong, really anticipated this type of start from the Winnipeg Jets. They're 15-1. And as you referenced, the hockey club, Utah Hockey Club here in Salt Lake, only 1 point behind Colorado, only 2 points behind Dallas. They're 15 points behind Winnipeg with 16 games played. Like, their start is insane. Plus 39 goal differential. That's historic, and it's the best in the NHL. What is their secret sauce? How do they keep getting it done?
I wish I knew that. I can only say from my perspective, I watched them play last night at Madison Square Garden, not live, but on TV, and I thought they were just terrific in Madison Square Garden, and they've got some great players up front. Scheifele scored 2 goals. Kyle Connor scored 2 goals for them. To go into Madison Square Garden and play an excellent Ranger team, by the way, and play Hellebuck versus Shesterkin, the two of the best 3 goalies in the league going head-to-head. I mean, Winnipeg was really, really impressive, and I think they're just getting it. They're getting everything. Let's face it, they're getting good goaltending out of Hellebuck. They're getting good defensive work, and they're getting timely goal scorers, as I just mentioned, with guys like Scheifele and Kyle Connor and others. And they've got a brand-new coach who's doing a heck of a job there. I don't know that firsthand other than reading the stats, but it's unheard of what they're doing. They're playing .938 hockey in win percentage. .938. It's crazy. They've already got 73 goals. So, you know what? They've got a secret sauce, and good for them. I mean, I didn't have them playing anything close to this. I had them down with Utah right now. Like, that's who I thought Utah would be fending against right now. Winnipeg. That's what I thought. But boy, oh boy, they've been fantastic.
73 goals scored, is first in the West by 10 goals. Vegas is second with 63. Like, it's insane how consistent and efficient they've been. But I have not asked you about Minnesota, and maybe this was a little bit more expected. They're also in the Central. They lose 2 of 3 to start. They go 9-3 since, and they're 23 points now, which would put them in first place in any other division outside of the Central. Actually, the Devils have 24, but you get the point. Minnesota also off to a really good start. What are you seeing from them?
And Minnesota also surprising a lot of people because they missed the playoffs last year. So what big, huge changes did they make in the offseason that made them go on this run? I don't know, other than mental changes and executing and playing very, very well and getting great goaltending out of Philip Gustafsson, who, by the way, got a goal this season already. The first goalie goal in Minnesota Wild history. He scored it this season, obviously on an empty net during a pulled goalie situation. But both those teams we're talking about, Winnipeg and Minnesota, have had fantastic road records. This is a team, Winnipeg, that's 7-0-0 on the road, and Minnesota that's 7-1-2 on the road. I mean, the road is hard to play, and they're both playing great. So you're right to pick on those two teams and pick them out. We all thought that Dallas was going to be the powerhouse, and Dallas is playing really well. But these two teams are, especially Winnipeg, they're just playing unearthly.
Before I set you loose, Neil, I wondered, because there are plenty of options. The one that stand out to me the most is Nashville, because everybody thought they were the winners of the offseason, but Pittsburgh hasn't been great. Edmonton hasn't been great. Of all the, quote, contending teams that are off to a slow start, which one do you think should be the most concerned?
I think Nashville, because I think they went out and spent a lot of money and they made the playoffs last year, and now they're sitting at the very bottom of the entire league with all this money spent and all these new players. I think that would be a very big concern, that they're not nearly what we thought. I think Pittsburgh is another team that, again, I don't know what their plan is. They got Sidney Crosby, they've got Malkin, they've got Letang, they have Erik Karlsson. They don't have a goalie. Their number one goalie, they sent him to the minors for a while. He's finally coming back now, the guy named Tristan Jarry. They've had trouble in goal. They've had trouble on defense. They've had trouble up front. They were losing 6-0 after the first period at home to Dallas. So, they've got their hands full, and I think those two teams, you can go through the Columbuses and the Chicagos and the Anaheims and the San Jose Sharks, all the teams that we know are in the middle of drastic rebuilds, and they're going to lose their share of games. But when Nashville and the Penguins are losing like they are, there's got to be alarm buttons being pushed in those two places.
All right, Neil, tell all of our listeners where they can go get your great podcast. We've got a lot of new hockey fans here in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and we're going. You know what I was thinking today, Spence? I want to get Bill Armstrong on at some point on the podcast, because I'd really like to speak to him about what they're doing in Utah. But you can get our podcast called NHL Wraparound on any podcast platform, from Spotify to Apple to Amazon and on and on. And you can also go to our website, which is NHLWraparound.com, and all the episodes are on our website. So we had. The other day, we had Tom Fitzgerald, the GM of the New Jersey Devils, on talking. That was really interesting. We found that to be a lot of fun. And the week before that, we had Bill Guerin, the GM of the Minnesota Wild, on. And so we always have somebody on that's really interesting to listen to, and we come up with some good stuff. So you'll learn something we hope that you'll learn something on every episode.
Well, we learn something every week when you come on this program, Neil, so thank you for the time, and have a great week ahead, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Spence.
All right, the great Neil Smith, one of the best roster constructors in the history of the sport, general manager of both the Rangers and the Islanders back in the day. He was the chief scout during the heyday of the Red Wings in the 80s and 90s. Get him on Twitter at NYC Neil is where you find him. Brought to you today by our friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles, which is the best spot for all your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon card collecting. Buy all your favorites there and even take your cards in. Maybe you have some rare cards in your collection you don't even know about. Start thinking about the holidays, what gifts you need to get for your friends and loved ones. Why not an Overtime Cards gift card? The perfect stocking stuffer. They have all the best trading cards and collectibles around. Go check them out online at overtimecardandcollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. Also, NBA Daily Assist today brought to you by About Time Pub, which is Utah's premier sports bar. They've got amazing food and killer cocktails. Make About Time your place for sports or even brunch. All food made from scratch, and they've got new mocktails for those of you that don't drink alcohol. More TVs than tables. Check them out. Keep them in mind for your holiday parties. Locations all the way from Ogden down to Lehigh and in between. 15-year anniversary now for our friends at About Time. They have in-house smoked wings. They show every UFC event, the big one coming up on Saturday night. Check them out. More information online at abouttimepub.com. Chris Kamrani live in studio coming up next right here on ESPN 700. mic on? You know what, man? It's official. I have to grow a mustache. I have to. You had one rocking for a while. You still have it a little bit, not near as front-facing as it was. And everybody who's cool right now has a mustache, including the guy sitting across from me. You can see him on YouTube with sunglasses on inside. Chris Camerani. I don't think I look good with a mustache, but I feel like I have to grow one now.
Well, this is more just my facial hair grows so intensely, so quickly that I have to think ahead. So I'm thinking ahead to Thanksgiving.
Okay.
We're going out to California to be with my family out there.
Lovely.
I know there's going to be nice pictures taken. My facial hair isn't necessarily the kind that's easiest to trim, even with a beard trimmer.
Uh-huh.
So you have to do a controlled burn. Sometimes you have to burn it down and then predict where it will look 2 to 3 weeks out. So this might look this way now, but give it 2 weeks and it'll be part of the forest once more.
The hair and the hair on the head, the hair on the face.
Yeah.
And mine grows fast, but I don't think it grows near the way yours does.
No, I mean, there's a reason why I don't cut my hair is because when I have short hair, I have to get a haircut every 3 weeks. Otherwise, it just starts to look bad. So I save money on a bleep ton of haircuts, and it's just easier for me.
Dude, you look good on YouTube. You look like the lead singer of an indie rock band.
Well, I mean, if we're going to be talking about Colorado, I guess it makes sense that I'm wearing my sunglasses inside.
It does. We have 4 people watching the YouTube stream now. Can we get to double digits before we get you out of here?
I say let's try to get to 6 before next break.
All right, we'll try to get to 6. We're on YouTube now. Check out CK. Looks like he came straight from Randy's Records. He's rolling in with sunglasses inside. He's got a great mustache.
Championship vinyl.
Nice pull. Good pull. All right, where to start? Well, we obviously have to start with what happened last Saturday night at Rice-Eccles Stadium, as we were both there as members of the media, hardworking members of the media. Saw you at the press box, had a lovely conversation. Let's just start macro viewpoint. How'd you digest Saturday night?
From which point of view?
Just your overall takeaways. We can start. I mean, we can do I can ask you specifics if you'd like. I'm just start to finish.
I'm not smart. I'm not smart enough to give a huge macro view, so I'm going to start with Utah.
Okay,
Does that work?
Utah takeaways. Let's start with Utah takeaways.
Played their best game of the year for what was it? 52 minutes, maybe a little less. They gave BYU everything they could handle. The defense looked like the type of defense that everybody believed to be the best defense in the Big 12 and one of the best in the country. But again, as we talked about last week when we were at Smith's, I felt like Utah had to turn the ball over turn BYU over in order to have a chance. They lose the turnover battle 2-0, and they're right there at the end with a chance. Weird game, as that game always is. I was impressed with the moxie of Brandon Rose. It was interesting to hear Kyle Whittingham say this week that the pick that he threw, not the one that was the trick play pick, wasn't his fault, that it was a receiver running the wrong route on the route tree. But now that Brandon's out, it's hard to even comprehend the bad luck that this program has at that position in the last 2 seasons, because last year was frustrating for fans because the will he won't he thing with Cam, but then people forget that Brandon lacerated his kidney in fall camp.
Yep.
Then you had Nate Johnson, Bryson Barnes. Bryson got hurt. Nate goes in the portal. You have to start the Ferrari the last game of the year against your guy against Colorado. And I was like, there's no way they're going to have to go through something like this again. And here they are. Brandon goes down in the last series of the game against BYU. And big takeaway is that Utah finds itself being able to throw its best punch against its rival and coming up short.
So we'll stick with the Utah side before we move over to the BYU side for a moment, because, I always like to get the opinion of people who have actually played the game and played the position. And Scott Mitchell, after the Houston game, said that he thought Brandon looked a lot better than Isaac. Now, the numbers don't bear that out. He was just saying from his vantage point, just the zip on the ball and just the presence in the pocket.
He looked confident.
Yeah, the pocket presence and such. And, up until the second half was atrocious offensively, and it clearly was let's see if we can run out the clock and play field position, 5 punts. They had great. All they needed was a field goal. All they needed was one lucky 20-yard chunk play and kick a field goal for them to win. But I thought Brandon, for the most part, to your point, looked pretty poised and looked, I would say better than Isaac has looked for the majority of the season. What does that say about the decision to plug Isaac in as the backup when it feels like maybe Brandon would have given them a better shot? Like, we are revisionist historians now, Monday Morning Quarterback, but there were so many games where the defense kept them in it that if they had just a proficient offense, not a great one, they would have been able to rack up a couple of wins. What does it say about the decision to put Isaac under center after Cameron went down?
Well, I think Isaac against TCU, against Arizona, against Houston looked different than Isaac did against Utah State and Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. And you can...
And Oklahoma State sucks.
And I know, but I'm just saying from a pure, confidence point of view, in that Houston game, he looked hurt and he looked like a player without any confidence. So it makes sense why he looked the way he did. You're talking about some politics. You're a guy who you recruited locally, a 4-star kid. I don't want to say that you're trying to keep him happy in this transfer portal era, but maybe. I don't know. I also think there is a little bit of Utah should have recruited Zach. They didn't. Zach went to BYU, had a great career, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't miss on another Wilson. And that's not to say that Isaac isn't going to measure up to his brother. It's still very early, and Zach did take his lumps early on in his career at BYU. But I think the conversation between Isaac and Brandon is sixes to me because really coming into the season, neither had ever taken a snap. Isaac was younger. Brandon had more experience in the system. He's injured last year, but he has way more experience in the system. I don't to the revisionist history point, I don't know if Brandon starts those games if Utah has a different record. But to me, it's more the fact that Utah has just been wholly unprepared from a backup quarterback position, as we've talked about, for the second year in a row.
And to your point, it is only fair to bring up the horrific luck that they've had with injuries under center, but I do think people are probably tired of leaning only on that. It's weird, man, because as we've talked about, and Coach Witt alluded to this on the coaches show last night, sorry for using it again, we can be as reductive as saying it's the quarterback thing. You really can do that. But we have 4 hours of space to fill. And also, it can't only be that when you've lost 5 straight. So if I remove that dynamic, what are the other things that come to...
It's hard, man.
Isn't it?
It honestly is. I think if I was being super nitpicky, just thinking back a couple of years ago, looking at and we're going to stay on offense because I think the offense has been obviously the primary issue
Defense
this year.
is solid. It always is.
Yeah. Offensive line has been subpar for most of the year. Played well against BYU, I thought. But looking back at the roster a couple of years ago, this program had at one point, it had Tavion Thomas, Jaquindon Jackson, Mekhi Bernard, Jalen Glover.
Yeah. Not for nothing.
Charlie Vincent. The depth that this program had just a couple of years ago at that position was insane. And they came into this season with not a lot of depth, with basically zero proven depth behind Mekhi Bernard and Jalen Glover. I know people were frustrated that Jalen couldn't get off the pine and now he's in the portal. But, if you're going to hang your hat on being the team that wants to run and then throw, especially when your starting quarterback is down, you have to have depth there. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't have it this year. And, Mekhi was a great complementary back under guys like, Jaquindon and Tavion, and he's proven to be the most important player this year. But Kyle will never come out and say things out loud, but he'll drop hints. Mm-hmm. Like he said throughout the early portion of the season, we don't want to give Mekhi more than 25 touches. We don't want him beat up, meaning he wasn't confident in what they had going behind Mekhi because he knows how valuable he was and how they basically couldn't lose him.
Well, and, you referenced Tavion and, Zach Moss, another one. Mekhi's not built like those big backs that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, he's not Devontae Booker. He's not Zach. He's not Jaquindon. He's not Tavion.
Right.
He's run like it this year. But you need, especially that we've seen at this school, you need 2 or 3 of those guys to be able to do it every single week. Yeah. I think Zach And Devontae, like if we're going back in time, I think you're talking about two guys that are just exceptions to the rule, like guys that could just do it and run the ball 30, 35 times a game and be okay for the most part.
Yeah.
That position, look at the NFL, man.
Yeah.
Like they're a dime a dozen. All you have to do is be a D3 running back at some podunk school in Oregon. You might find Kyle Shanahan and he'll turn you into a Pro Bowler. But other than that, it's just the position is so difficult to stay healthy at. And when you're a program that wants to be able to run first, I know fans were coming into this season saying, oh, Andy's going to open up the playbook and Cam's going to have all this and that. It's like, no, man, if you know Kyle Whittingham, he is the guy that wants to run the ball, control the clock, and play defense no matter what.
So you referenced Jalen, which I find interesting because Jalen Glover had some really good games for Utah football in really big moments, in the past. And I think at one point, again, not for nothing, there were some people that thought he could really be the next great running back in this program, could never get off the pine. When he didn't do much, and now he's gone. What do you make of just the pretty rapid fall from grace of Jalen Glover?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year he had 550-ish yards of rushing offense. I don't know how much of that came in like a starting role and a complementary role in mop-up time. I do think, like, obviously he was a talented kid. He was a 4-star kid out of Florida that chose to come to Utah. Watch Zach Moss do it as another Florida kid. I just think, Spence, we're in this era now where, like, you can't take it personally or you can't overthink it if a guy leaves. Like, sometimes it just doesn't work out at a school. And regarding Jalen, I don't know if Jalen is your number 2 running back and goes 50-50 reps-wise with Mekhi. I don't think that makes Utah a better team this year. I just don't think it does.
So last year when my guy, the Ferrari, was starting against Colorado, Jalen goes for 107 on 17 carries, 25 carries, 86 yards in that ugly 14-7 win over UCLA. Some other decent, like he was never an All-American, but he certainly has experience in the program and 3 or 4 really big games as a starter in big spots.
Yeah, and now there are going to be, more questions asked considering this is Mekhi's last year and there really isn't a quote-unquote next guy in the pipeline. I know people are really high on Mike Mitchell, but Mike Mitchell hasn't stayed healthy all year. The Anthony Woods kid who transferred from Idaho, people were stoked about, but I guess he got hurt way back in spring. It's an odd – it goes back to what I was saying a couple weeks ago. I think everybody just banked on – so many things going perfectly right for Utah in very key positions. And one of them, oddly enough, turned out to be the running back position because Mekhi's been basically everything they've needed, but still they've lucked out in that sense, Spence. Like if Mekhi got hurt a few weeks ago or like the second or third game of the year, like this team is they're up Bleep Creek real fast.
For sure. All right. So game ends, down on the field, dodging water bottles. It wasn't just the BYU.
It's a Matrix?
Yes.
You're doing some Neo? Okay.
It wasn't just the BYU cheerleading coach. I was dodging water bottles. Sean was dodging water bottles. They were coming down.
They were throwing them at Sean?
They were throwing them at Sean, a former Utah football player. Has not been reported by the D News. Okay, but please, can we get that one out there?
A man who's literally won $1 million for hurting somebody else.
Yes.
These people. These Youngs, man. How dare they?
Yes, the Youngs are out of control. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know that anybody was aiming at anybody else. They were just coming down on the field, and there was a lot of them, for sure. Do the thing, say what's up to my guy Kalani, A-Rod, Tom Homo, pay my respects, and then go up to the media room. And as I'm walking home, about 2 a.m., 2:30, phone blows up. Text, DMs, everything. Did you hear what Mark Harlan just said? I said, no, I'm walking home. Buddy sends me a link to a video on social. I pull it up, and I go, oh, my gosh. I thought he was going to be in so much trouble. Okay, so everybody's heard it by now. Quote, I've been an athletic director for 12 years. By the way, is that long enough to, brag about? I've been an athletic director for 12 years. This game was absolutely stolen from us. We were excited to be in the Big 12, but tonight I am not. We won this game. Someone else stole it from us. I'm very disappointed. I will talk to the commissioner. This is not fair to our team. I am disgusted by the professionalism of the officiating crew tonight. I thought I was going to wake up to an audio recording of Mark Harlan calling Brett Yormark, asking him if he could find him 2 points for the game from Saturday night. But my first reaction, like Brett Yormark is a sleeping with the fishes Northeast sports executive that I'm sure when he woke up to this, he went, oh, really? Okay. I think $40K and a public reprimand is about as good as Mark could have expected after attacking the conference and the integrity of the officials. Your reaction when you heard it, and where are you at with it right now?
So I was working on my story sitting in the plushy chairs away from the windows at Rice Eccles because it's a little chilly there, and I wanted to stay warm and be away from all the other pecking of the keyboards. And it was piped in because they pipe in Witt's presser.
Okay.
And as soon as he said that, like, I text Aaron. I was like, did you get that whole thing? Like, luckily Aaron's a way better journalist than me, and he recorded it as soon as Mark stepped to the lectern. But to me, Spence, the most surprising thing was him saying that he was happy to be in the Big 12 until Saturday. That was the biggest part of the whole thing.
The quiet part out loud.
Correct.
As the kids would say these days.
If I'm putting myself in Mark's shoes, and if he did just leave the locker room where those guys were despondent, and what they needed more than anything in the world was to win that type of game against that team and to have that ending, I understand that the emotions of the moment can overtake you, but you just can't do it. It's a terrible look. I think Val Hale, who used to be BYU's AD, spoke to somebody in the media this week, and Val was saying how he was just stunned, like ADs never do that. But conversely, I was listening to the Canzano Wilner pod this week, and they had Rick Neuheisel on, who was really good. You guys should get Rick on because he's a very, very smart guy. John Canzano brought up a good point. He's like, is there a world in which that move by Mark helps a groundswell of motivation from the fan base, from like an NIL perspective, from like anything, and if you're taking this, happening from a different viewpoint, maybe, but my immediate takeaway was bad look. The game was not stolen from them. It was an obvious call. It's a brutal call, and I think it's a call that often doesn't go called because, listen, man, even the most insanely zealous football fans know that there's holding on every single play. And I know that there were Utah fans who slowed down the video and said, Van Fillinger was being held in the line, and then this guy was being held on. I get it, but it's like this is a subjective sport, like officiated by human beings. You're going to have human error. I don't think the officiating crew, I don't think the judge who threw the flag on Zemaivon was wrong, though. I don't think that was an error.
So, excuse me, and I just would have loved to be there when Brett Yormark woke up and looked at his phone. The statement from the Big 12 is as follows. Pardon me. Quote, Mark's comments irresponsibly challenged the professionalism of our officials and the integrity of the Big 12 Conference. There's a right way and a wrong way to voice concerns. Unfortunately, Mark chose the wrong way. Accordingly, the violation warrants a public reprimand and a financial penalty, $40K. The Big 12 Conference prioritizes professionalism, integrity, and fairness, and will continue to do so. And look, Chris, it just feeds into this narrative, and probably some of it's fair, probably some of it's giving cowards online who utilize the online presence to feel brave about themselves too much credit. But there is this thing in the conference, like Ute fans feel like they're too good for the Big 12. Ute fans feel like they should be in the Big 10. And now it's a team that's won one conference game, and their AD is kind of attacking the conference. Like, this is not going to endear Utah football to its – and I don't know how long Utah football will be in the Big 12. I don't know
Nobody
how long –
knows where anyone will be in 2 or 3 years.
But what if it's 5, 6, 7 years?
Yeah.
And this is – like, what's your alternative right now? There's not an invite from the Big 10. Are you going to go back to the Pac-12 or the Mountain West? Like, this does not endear you to the other members and your peers around the conference, and I don't think it endears the fan base.
Well, it definitely doesn't endear the fan base or the university to their peers when something like this happens. But I will say, if the shoe was on the other foot, if Utah was undefeated and BYU was 4-5 and on a 5-game losing streak, and if Utah got that call, if a BYU defensive back holds Dorian Singer on 4th and 10, and they get the call. They march down the field and kick a game-winning field goal to remain undefeated. The exact same conversation is happening the other way. I promise you. You know what I mean? Like, that's the interesting part of this rivalry, especially, like, I know anybody in that situation is going to cry foul, but it is what it is. And like I told Sean when I was on the OC show earlier this week, they still had to go 50, 55 yards.
Yeah, they did.
Cam Calhoun dropped an interception the very next play that would have ended the game.
Yep.
I understand the frustration, but the call was the right call, and the defense still allowed that offense to go 50, 55 yards to get in field goal range for a good field goal kicker.
Yeah, don't punt it 5 times. And when you get the ball on the 40, 45, get 15 or 20 yards and see if Cole can get you 3. Because if you just had one half-decent drive in the second half, it would have been enough based on the final score to potentially win the thing. I mean, there are so many other things to focus on as far as the failed performance in the second half after hanging 21 on BYU in the second quarter alone.
I was amazed that they were able to score 3 touchdowns.
For sure. And the stadium's like, oh, look at this. We finally have an offense with a pulse. And they completely took the foot off the gas. What do you attribute the second half offensive failures to most?
Brant getting hurt. I mean, he had his most involved game, I think, so far this year. I think BYU figured out what Utah was trying to do. I think once Brant went out, I think it was obvious that Utah was going to run on first and second down and then try to throw a bubble screen or do, look for Dorian Singer as you should. But good teams find a way to win. It reminded me, like, I hate to draw the analogies for Utah fans, but like in a weird way, it reminded me of like that 08 season where you have to win ugly games if you're going to be there at the end undefeated. And BYU has so far. They won that terribly ugly game at SMU earlier on this year. They won a game that they should have lost to Oklahoma State when Jake Retzlaff hits Darius Lassiter for a 35-yard touchdown with 10 seconds left. And then you have the good fortune of being bailed out on a holding call on 4th and 10 backed up against your own end zone. And then you still go fifth. I mean, listen, as soon as Jake hit Chase Roberts, who made an amazing catch, I knew it was over.
That was the moment.
I knew it was over.
Yep.
And, I mean, they showed the slow-mo replay inside Rice Eccles, and the fact that Chase was able to keep – it was like 2 index fingers were able to basically keep the nose of the football off the ground by, like, centimeters. It was insane. But, yeah, it's not a great look. I think Mark's remarks were a culmination of a month plus long of frustrations boiling over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's hard not to see, like, this team was on a 4 game skid. They were facing their rival, had everything to play for, were, in position to win, and the ball didn't bounce their way. And regardless, I think this program is in a place now that it hasn't found itself in 10 years. I mean, I think 2013, 2014 were the 2 years that Kyle went 5-7, maybe it's 12 and 13. But, like, this is a place where Utah hasn't found itself under Kyle Whittingham. He has 2 losing seasons in his career as head coach, and he could be looking at a third. And there were 10 winning seasons in between.
We'll get to the BYU side of this coming up next. BYU rolls in at number 6 in the second iteration of the CFP. But before we do, CK, one more thing on this dynamic. And you've kind of alluded to certain things with this, so maybe you've already given me your answer. But from the second I heard Mark's comments as I was walking home on campus with earpods in, just my jaw hitting the floor, like, what is going on? And I still haven't landed on anything. My thought was, why? My thought was, what did you think that was going to accomplish? And whether it's college football or pro basketball or MLS or whatever it is, there's got to be a Derek Garduno, a Trey Fitzgerald, whatever it is. There's got to be somebody that can get in the way and in the ear of a coach or an administrator that is red hot before they crack that microphone. And I saw it firsthand for years at MSG with Eric Gelfand. Now, you met Eric because he was involved with RSL for a while. He's now the PR director of the Jets, where whether it was my father or Pat Riley or Jeff Van Gundy or whoever it was, Eric was a master at saying, pause for a second before you go out there. Okay?
You telling me Big Dave was going for the microphone sometimes after games?
Absolutely. Okay. A couple of different times. Cool. Every time there was a Nick Heat brawl, and a bunch of Knicks would get suspended, everybody wanted to go for the jugular because there was. And when David Stern announced the Knicks suspension, this is a history lesson nobody gives a rip about. I mean, the heat, not to no pun intended, was sky high, and Gelfand was always a master at understanding, reading the room about, okay, who's about to say something that could get everybody in trouble. And I'm not blaming anybody up there because, look, it sounds like Mark just went rogue. He didn't have to do this. ADs don't address the media after a game. And I've just gone over all the scenarios. So he said in his statement, which was not an apology, it missed the mark. It just did. Just say, I'm sorry. And my guess is Mark would want a mulligan. I don't know. I haven't talked to him. We've reached out to try to get him on the show. But he said in his statement, he went in the locker room. I don't know the dynamic of the relationship between Mark and Kyle. Is there something like he wanted to prove to his head coach that he has his back?
Yeah,
He's a tough guy. Because he was also on the field yelling at the refs when the kick return was going on. So, long way of asking a simple question. Why do you think he did it?
My uninformed opinion is, can I say 25% in, having his coach's back, 25% speaking to the fans about the frustration in a very long season. And then I'm going to go 50% just pure in the moment.
Heat of the moment.
Heat of the moment.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going.
All right, coming up next, we'll get to some BYU takeaways, and then we'll also get with CK about the Colorado game because he's been down there a couple of times covering the Buffs, and that's Utah's next opponent. I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It is the best place to get real money sports action, so you don't have to worry about all of the phrases you hear, and you're like, what are they talking about? Like, what's the spread? What's the over-under? What's the money line? This is much easier. All you do is pick over or under, more or less, I should say, on 2 to 6 player stat projections. So, for instance, we'll use the Jazz Suns last night. Lauri Markkanen, more or less than 17.5 points. Devin Booker, more or less than 3.5 3-point field goals made, right? That's all you do. And you can parlay it, and you can actually win real money. I found this to be the easiest way to do it because if you pay attention to sports, like if you play fantasy football, you have a good idea of what these stat projections are all about. They're giving away free money right now, so you might as well go grab that and see if you like it. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. One more big segment with Chris Camarati coming up next on a Wednesday on ESPN 700. We got CK live in studio for one more big segment, typically a Friday staple of ours, but Leo's in daycare, so we get CK today. How's fatherhood, man? You enjoying it?
So tiring.
It is.
Nobody warned me.
I warned you.
Everybody warned me. I'm lying.
Yeah, it is tiring.
I'm not going to make myself out to be the martyr. I can do it. Everybody can do it.
You can do it for sure. I have faith in you. Oftentimes, I'll think about my mother, who had
How many kids?
6 kids. And at one point, it was 5 kids, 11 and under. I'm the oldest. And old man's a little busy, right? With the
that's
job.
like Lord of the Flies, man.
Oh, it was chaos.
Yeah.
It was absolute chaos. I mean, everyone's good and alive and doing well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, moving cross country, 5 kids, 11 and under. And I had one. And then I said, the rest is up to y'all, and they handled it just fine. Okay, so the Checketts flock is plentiful.
Oh, I can't imagine. Yeah,
I think 21 at this point, with another one on the way. Are we gonna see more?
Oh man, don't pull that on me on live radio. How dare you? No, it is funny. Like, you know, my wife is one of 5 girls, and I'm jealous of that like giant family in that. Eventually, the flock just takes care of itself, and I'm sure that's how it was with you and your siblings as well. Maybe a little different for you since you were the oldest. You probably had more responsibility than others, but I for the life of me, I just can't imagine. I think it's because I had kids late too. Like, I'm 38 soon, so.
See, it's funny, and this is not a broad stroke statement, but it feels like a lot of people that were raised in big family chaos were jealous of the only children, and the only children
Correct.
that weren't raised in the big family, they wanted more siblings.
Yeah,
but
no, that makes sense.
Leo's hanging in.
He's cool, man. I mean, like, he's got an attitude problem.
Yeah, he's 2. That happens.
Yeah, but he's chill.
It's funny. You go through this thing where it's like they're boring because all you do is keep them alive.
Yep.
And there's not a whole. That's cute and he's adorable.
Yeah.
Then they start to show some personality. Like, oh, this is fun. Then they hit that thing at 2 where you're like, what?
What's
happened? Your deal, dude?
Yeah. What did I do to you?
Negotiating with me. You wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for me.
I can't tell you how many times I've wiped up spilled milk and soup and Cheerios and strawberries, and it's like, what, man? I've done so much to make sure you have all the nicest snacks at your disposal, and it's just never good enough.
It's never good enough. Anyway, moving on. All right, so we talked about the Utah takeaways from this. By the way, if you're just hopping in your car, Jalen Glover has hit the transfer portal. Brandon Rose officially is out for the year. Mekhi Pittman actually released a video explaining his side of things, too. He's never a big part of the attack this year. But on BYU's side of things, before we get to where they're at in the CFP, let's talk about the takeaways from just simply another game where they answered every question that was thrown at them. And yes, there's an element of fortune to winning in sports, but that's not new, okay? If you want to do something special, Lady Luck shines upon you no matter how good you are. That's just the deal. So what did you make of what you saw from BYU on Saturday night, you know, after kind of settling in a little bit, you know, and ultimately, again, answering the questions they needed to in the second half to get the win?
Yeah, again, I'm going to harken back to my only other experience covering an undefeated team, which was 16 years ago. And like I talked about this with those guys when I went down to Provo a couple weeks ago. It's like Lady Luck does have to be on your side. Like, Utah fans forget, I hope they didn't forget, but like when they beat TCU in that game, they had their kicker miss twice. Like the Oregon State win, they were down 11 with like 2 minutes to go. They came back and won. You needed a like 6-string wide receiver to block a field goal at New Mexico. Like, all this stuff has to happen. So if I'm going to fast forward to Saturday, makes sense that Jake Retzlaff fell on like all 4 of his fumbles, like in like the most odd fashion.
Yep.
The one in, you know, deep in Utah territory, if Utah turns the ball over, you know, you take BYU out of the red zone and you have momentum. Then like the double fumble on the bad snap deep in their own end zone, Jake manages to fall on it twice. It's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and you have to win ugly games. That game was no doubt an ugly game. I think to me the takeaway was BYU faced its best defense that it'll face in the regular season so far, and that should only help Aaron's scheme for the future. I do think they probably should have gotten the run game involved a little bit more. Granted, Utah's defense was very good, and I don't know if LJ Martin was going to have a great night. But as we saw in the fourth quarter, once Hinckley Rapati got in the game, he had a tremendous effect on that offense those last couple of drives. So plenty. It's weird to say that a 9-0 team has plenty to work on, but this team does. And I think if you're a coach, like, Kalani told me, it's like when you're undefeated, you're either riding the wave or you're, guarding for pitfalls. He told me they're definitely doing the latter, and especially after a game like that against Utah, I think their guard will be up going into this game against Kansas. I think it would have been a totally quote-unquote trap game, and it still might be had they run all over Utah and been feeling a little high and mighty. But I think those guys have to understand that they were, in a sense, lucky to get out of Rice Eccles with a win.
Well, and I wanted to ask you that because on a scale of lucky to quest for perfection awesomeness, where are you at with who BYU is as a team overall? Because even on Saturday night, and there are a bunch of different ways you could go with this, even on Saturday night, the Keelan Marion kid takes it back for a touchdown,
huge,
right?
Yeah.
And early on, they were not moving the football.
No.
And I'm kind of going, this could be like 10-3 Utah. This could be a really – BYU can't move the ball, low-scoring game. Boom, they get a kick return for a touchdown. And that's just in a vacuum is a snapshot of who they've been all year. Whatever the night needs, they seem to be able to bring it. So on a scale of, okay, this team has been incredibly lucky to holy smokes, they're very good. Where are you at on an overall macro view?
Is it lame to say the middle? Is it okay?
No, because
Okay.
I don't know where I'm at.
Yeah, I would say the middle at this point, because honestly, they're an undefeated team that has blown out, I think, one team, and it was that crazy Kansas State game where like they were outgained by 200 yards and like lost the time of possession battle, but managed to score quickly every time they turned the ball over against K-State. Like, it's not a running roughshod type team over its opponents. So I think that is to their benefit going into the stretch run of the season because they have been up against it so many times. But I think the last three games are a little harder than we would have anticipated a couple of weeks ago. I mean, Kansas just beat Iowa State, who turns out is not I guess in theory is still a Big 12 contender, but not at the same level as BYU or Colorado. Arizona State is like the surprise. I think you can say is the surprise of college football this year, considering where they were last year. And going down to Tempe is always a tough task. Houston, I'll just be basic and say they should win that game. But they're an undefeated team that still haven't played their best game. And I'm going to be that cliche coach, but like if you can get to 9-0, if you can get to November, what was it the other night, November 9th, and be 9-0 and still not play that great of a game, it means in theory, if you're trending upwards and if you believe that you can reach an apex that's still out there, that speaks pretty highly of where you guys are at.
So we get the second iteration of the CFP rankings last night, and Brigham Young comes in at 6, which was one spot higher than I thought they would be 7, okay? But they come in at 6. Right now, when you look at the national championship odds, the favorite to win the title is actually Ohio State. Then it goes Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, Penn State, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Indiana, Miami, Clemson, SMU, Colorado, BYU.
Wow.
BYU is plus 10,000 right now to win the national championship. So Vegas doesn't think BYU is national championship good. I don't either. Look, as we've always talked about, Big Ten, SEC, it's different down there. It just is. They have the biggest brands and the best teams in college football. I don't think that's debatable. Now, can any team beat any other team on any given day? TCU taught us that, yes, but then they got stomped in the national championship game. But coming in at 6, Chris, actually leaves a little space in my mind for the Big 12 to potentially get 2 in if this happens. If BYU enters the Big 12 championship at 12-0.
Yeah, got to get through undefeated.
Yeah, they've got to finish the regular season. They've got to handle their business 3 more times. They go to Dallas 12-0. We'll say Colorado handles their business. They go in as a 2-loss team. I think if Colorado beats Brigham Young, and they obviously get the bid as the AQ, conference champ, and BYU is a 1-loss team that was undefeated into the Big 12 championship, I now believe there's a chance they get in. I'm not saying it's done. I still think most of the messaging we get from college football folk is that they don't like the Big 12. It's a one-bid league. It's the champ, and that's it. But what do you think about that? BYU stays clean, goes to Dallas, ends up 12-1, losing to Colorado in a Big 12 championship game.
I think if you're a BYU fan, you have to hope that the insane schedule of the SEC cannibalizes itself the rest of the year. Because, I mean, if Georgia loses another game, I don't know if they're going to get in.
They're cooked if they lose another, yeah.
But conversely, if they beat Tennessee, then they're way back in the conversation, and Tennessee is still going to hover in that conversation as well. Indiana and BYU moving up higher than most is felt like kind of an overcorrection after last week for both, especially considering Indiana is still undefeated in the Big Ten. I know they haven't necessarily played the type of schedule that other Big Ten teams have, but I think they play. Do they play Ohio State next?
They do. So we'll learn more about that.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a huge kind of barometer for where we'll find the rankings for next week. I would like to think that a 12-1 BYU team with a theoretical loss to a Colorado team who, if they beat BYU, would be the number 4 seed. I would like to think that the playoff committee would give them a chance, but I agree with you. I think they're the people, the folks out there are theoretically down on the Big 12 at the moment in terms of being more than a one-bid league, but I don't know. It would feel pretty hollow, and it would kind of harken us back to those times when, like even going back to the BCS era where teams didn't have a fair shot, or even the 4-team playoff where even undefeated teams as recently as last year with Florida State getting left out. So somebody is going to be pissed. Somebody is going to be heartbroken. But BYU, if you're talking about BYU, they just have to handle their business over the next month and remain in the conversation, because there's a world in which if some of these teams beat each other and other teams lose, like BYU could be as high as, I don't know, could be as high as 4 going into, the last week of the season. And if that's the case, I think it would be too hard for the committee to drop a top 4 or 5 team completely out of the rankings if their one loss was to a Big 12 championship team.
I agree with that. Now, it's always the caveat of what does the committee look at? What do they value? It feels like it's fluid and it changes every week. And then it feels like they make one dude draw the short straw to go talk to the media. He has no idea what he's talking about. He says 10 different things. You're like, dude, land on the target, man. But the Vegas favorite to win the Big 12 championship right now plays their football in Boulder, which is where we find Utah coming up this weekend. You've been down there multiple times. You've done stories on Coach Prime, and you've done stories on this team. And it's interesting because the headline is Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. And honestly, I don't know that I've seen a player like Travis Hunter in my life in college football. It's insane watching what he does on both sides of the ball. But LaJohntay Webster, Will Shepard, Jimmy Horn Jr. all have over 30 catches. All are hovering at least over 400 yards. Travis is about 900 yards. All are over 13 yards a catch. The Miller kid is at 21.6 yards per catch.
He's their fifth wide receiver.
He's their 5th wide receiver. They have 7 wide receivers who have caught touchdowns. So they don't run the ball because they don't have to.
Yep.
The line opened up at 10. It's moved to 11.5. The Sharks or the wise guys like Colorado in this matchup. We've seen a lot of money go the way of the Buffs. 11.5 is the line for Colorado. What do you make of the matchup? Early kick Saturday as Utah heads to Boulder.
Bad matchup for Utah, especially coming off the emotional toll of losing that game to BYU. It also tells me that Vegas doesn't think all that highly of Isaac Wilson starting this game.
Correct.
Not a shot at Isaac, but it is what it is. We saw the line move back and forth when it was Isaac or Cam earlier on in the year. I think it's just a totally different matchup than BYU. That being said, if Utah's defense can show up again, I do think they can keep Utah in a game against Colorado, because the offensive line, while it has been improved, can whittle under pressure. And they have a bunch of new players, and their left tackle is a 5-star true freshman kid who has been playing phenomenal, but I don't know if he's gone up against the likes of Van Fillinger, Connor O'Toole, or Logan Fano, in succession, the way that Utah can throw defensive ends at him. Offensively, I just don't know where they go. I honestly don't.
Yeah.
I think the offensive line will have to play its best game of the year in order to give Isaac time. I think if you're Mike Bajakian, You have to find a steady dose of Mekhi Bernard and Mike Mitchell and Charlie Vincent and whomever is going to be at running back now. And to me, it's going to be about treading water because Colorado, they've fallen behind in games often, like as they did in Texas Tech last week. But they can score so fast and they're so dynamic. Like it does kind of remind me of, like those old video game teams where you would just have the best quarterback and have a bunch of receivers and just let it rip. They have, I think outside of Ohio State, you can make an argument they have the best wide receiver core in the country, and all of them are transfers. That is the Deion Sanders effect to a T. And give him credit, man. I mean, I know a lot of folks were up in arms for some reason about the way Deion did it, and he is a mercurial guy. I've spent the better part of the last 18 months trying to figure out who he is as a coach through various stories, and he's a very interesting guy. He's always been the same dude going back to his time as a superstar cornerback. But they're 7-2, Spence, and they control their own destiny. And part of that is a testament to how bad the Big 12 is this year. I mean, I think if you're in a decent conference, I don't think Colorado is necessarily there, but you play who you got. And Colorado is playing a bunch of teams that aren't that great, and they haven't necessarily – the best teams that they've played, they've lost to so far. But you get hot at the right time, and that's all that matters, and the Buffs are hot.
You going to get on Blue Sky?
No.
You're not?
No, I haven't been on social media in like 10 days. It feels very nice. It's very clearing. The cleansing of the mind, it's a real thing, man.
100% it is.
Like I just feel like, I might as well just like work out or clean the house or just like go for a walk, shovel some snow.
Do anything other than doom scroll.
Or just like, what am I doing?
Yes,
like I thought about this. Like, do you remember back in the day on the internet when you would just like go to ESPN.com to look for stories? Just like, maybe I'll just go to this website in search of a story. I don't need this like third party filter full of spam and all this other terrible stuff to get me there. It is easier, but it's so unnecessary because we lived that life once upon a time and we were fine back then.
First, honestly, I still do that. I go to the Trib, right? I go to Dean. I read the local stuff.
Yeah.
Then I go to ESPN. I go to the Athletic, and
proud subscriber.
Of course, from day one. You kidding? we're big supporters of the Athletic,
my man.
And then it's crazy because I'll pull up Twitter, and then I stick with the following column, the following algorithm.
Yeah.
But as soon as I hit For You, it's like
the seventh circle of hell.
Bum fights, porn, and like political BS. It's the weirdest thing.
And it's slow-mo videos of Zemaiah Vaughn did not hold Chase Roberts.
Oh, so many. In fact, I want to end on that because I wanted to ask you what you make of the off-field dynamic of this thing when it's like, because people ask me all the time, what's the most insufferable fan base, Utah or BYU?
Both.
And I say whoever wins.
I'd say both regardless.
Whoever wins that year is more insufferable than the other. But I always find it like a fascinating case study, like a societal case study of what we are in this market and in the state where you have BYU fans so badly want the moral high ground. So you get the send me every video you have of a Ute fan swearing at you on Saturday.
Or throwing trash on the field.
Send me every video you have. I watched a video of a young lady from down south who came up here to go to the game, and it's 5 minutes, and essentially I'll bottom line it. She wore BYU gear to the Utah Stadium and went to a football game where some people weren't all that nice. It took her 5 minutes to unpack that, right? But, of course, it's like, so sorry you went through that. And then on the other side, it's the Ute fan wanting to call out the hypocrisy of the folks that want to be holier than thou and have the moral high ground. And it ultimately becomes this big stew of, like, pretty poor behavior from everybody involved. And like you, I don't live on the internet, so I don't see a lot of it. But I see enough of it where that dynamic of this game always fascinates me, I guess is what I'm saying. How do you kind of digest that?
Yeah, I'll say both. I believe both programs hold one another in very high regard, and for obvious reasons, because the crossover, the cross-pollination is so like rampant. This is a fan base rivalry. I'll just say that.
It is,
and that's okay. I don't like using the holy war. I think
I'm not a huge fan.
It's a little much, but it's a rivalry that permeates through marriages and families and households and friendships, and it's awesome. It's why we watch it. It's why I don't know what the numbers were, but I'm sure the numbers were really high from a TV rating perspective on Saturday night, because the game always delivers. And people, fan is short for fanatics, Spence, and people are nuts. Yep. And credit to them for loving their university or whatever team they support. But let's just say, no matter who wins in what year, you're never going to be satisfied, because that is just the nature of it.
Yep, no doubt. And the other dynamic that I just it cracks me up. I think it's so funny where you get the Ute fan that sees the BYU fan who had a bad experience, and he's like, "Bro, we're not all like that. I promise you." And then you look at his Twitter feed, and all it is just attacking other people for things that the hypocrisy is
wait. You're
hilarious to me.
You're telling me we live in a world where people are just awful to each other online?
A little bit. I don't know if you noticed. All right, man. Great to see you. Okay, we'll chat soon.
Thanks, man.
Chris Comrani, staff writer from The Athletic. Always appreciate his time. Let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Pros. Affordable options for wireless internet, your wireless cable, your cable television, your wireless services, then also your internet. So 3 different options. You're paying too much for all of them. I can promise you Ryan has solutions if you dial 801-424-DISH. What's up, buddy?
We've got awesome solutions, and today is the last day that I have this double stacked offer. And I'll tell you, you want to call and take advantage of this, because with Dish right now, you get set up. We'll get you the best promotion, price guaranteed, the best offer with 2 years worth of credits. And as I mentioned, the price is guaranteed not to change for 2 years. We'll throw in movie channels, the multi-sports pack, which includes that NFL Red Zone. This is your last chance on this. Plus, guys, we want to dial you up right. So how about you want to watch the Tyson fight? I'll get you Netflix free for the next 2 years. Now, if you already have Netflix, this still will work for you. You realize the value of that. That's worth $370+. Take advantage of this stacked offer. We'll get you the biggest DVR out there. If you're a cable customer, DirecTV customer, you will plan on saving anywhere between $70 to $100+ a month. And that doesn't even count if we can help with internet. We've got fantastic offers there. We've got gift cards. And we can lower your internet bill. Even use the same fiber you're currently using, just pay a different provider and pay less money. And it's the same thing in the mobile cell phone world, because Boost Mobile is building out this 5G network. And as they're building out the network, they're piggybacking off the biggest wireless provider in the nation. Probably know who they are. Begins with the first letter of the alphabet. Here's the thing. You could be using their service and using their towers, switch to a different provider, get a brand new iPhone 16 Pro or the new Samsung S24 free, and spend $20, $30 a month per line. And, if you've got a family with a number of phones, this can add up quick. Call us and let us save you literally thousands. We see customers that are $200-$300 a month that we can save. It's just up to you. You just got to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, this is what I have. This is what I want. And let us work our magic. Call us now, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
I want to tell you about my friends at Advanced Window Products, Nate Orchard, Jake Weber, just the best dudes, man. Good people. When you choose a business, choose the people. You can choose these people. They're local, not going anywhere, and they're a big part of our community, and they want to take care of you. It's the #1 rated window company in Utah. It's locally owned. There's no middleman markup. You save a grip of money. If you need to replace your windows now, you should give them a call. But if you anticipate needing to replace your windows in the coming months, call today as well, because if you get on their schedule, you take advantage of their football special, which is a $2,500 savings when you purchase 10 windows or more. So beat the rush. Order today from the factory to your front door in 8 weeks or less. Give them a call at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100 or online at advancedwindows.com. A little sports court comes your way coming up next right here on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. Gentlemen, happy Wednesday. How we doing?
Hey, Spence. How are you?
Hey, Spence.
All good here. Appreciate the time. So let's get into it. We got a little local flavor. We got a little rivalry game flavor as a video was uncovered that actually lended the proof that was needed after the rumor that a BYU cheer coach was hit with a water bottle at Rice-Eccles Stadium. So the video's out there. Let's start with that one. What should our listeners know about the potential implications here?
Yeah, Spence. So as we know, over the weekend, not a great ending for the Utah football team, not a great look for the Utah AD, and not a great look for some of the fans, and especially now we know who the fan was. What happened was there a bunch of fans were throwing water bottles and different things out on the field, and as we heard that one of the water bottles came flying out of the stands and hit the BYU cheer coach in the head and reported knocked her unconscious. So Garrett and I were talking this week, and we were channeling our inner Michael McCann even before a legal issue came out and said, hey, there might be a legal issue here. There might be. So I'm going to start with the one potential civil liability. And what we look at here, we've talked about a bunch of cases where fans have been hurt by a flying baseball, where nets haven't been up, or there have been utility boxes in places. And the question is there civil liability? Well, the first easy one is there's definitely civil liability on the part of the person throwing the water bottle. We can all agree that it's not safe to throw a partially filled or full water bottle out into a crowd where it could potentially hit someone and cause damage, even if you didn't mean to. It's what we call negligence. And then the next issue is, did it cause damage? And apparently this person was hurt. But the more important issue, I think, is if we kind of extend what we're looking at is there potential liability on the part of the university or Rice-Eccles Stadium? And the question comes in, do you have a duty to keep fans safe? I think you do. But the question is it foreseeable that fans are going to take actions like this that would, extend to liability to the U? And again, this isn't something that's happened. We're not saying it's happened, but we're kind of looking at this as potential where it could go. And I suspect that if this woman, the cheer coach, was really injured badly, and we hope she is, and apparently got a concussion, and there's not going to be, extensive medical treatment and medical expenses and that type of thing, I would bet that someone would look into that type of liability and what the security was into preventing that type of thing. But that's just a hypothetical right now, and we have another part of it. Garrett can talk about it.
Go ahead, Garrett.
Well, yeah, I mean, the news we have now is that they have identified this kid. He's apparently 18 years old and not a student at the University of Utah. But, there's all kinds of video and everything, and he's been identified. The story I read was his dad actually turned him in. So, Thanksgiving around dinner around their table. But anyway, he's been charged with a Class A misdemeanor assault charge. And so not totally unsurprising here. A couple things. One, that he's been identified, and two, been charged with assault. So this just happened. University of Utah police have apparently he was arrested and released, but formal charges haven't been filed yet.
So do you guys want to, because I have the second story about the arrest, do you want to continue to talk about that, or do you want to move on?
Yeah, move on.
Okay.
Until you hit it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, just checking. All right, over to NCAA limitation on JUCO players. This is the Vanderbilt quarterback's lawsuit. I think, well, it feels like we've talked about this before. Maybe it's a new one. Maybe I'm confusing it with another one. So fill us in here with this Vandy QB suing the NCAA.
Yeah, this is a new one, but he's, of course, rose to fame here as the QB who got Vanderbilt to a win against Alabama. And so he's Diego Pavia, I guess I think I say his name. But anyway, he did 2 years at New Mexico Military Institute, a JUCO, and then he did 2 years at New Mexico State. And so here he is now in his fifth year at Vanderbilt. And so he had filed a suit last week, and part of that was a temporary restraining order. And this is over his eligibility. He is claiming that his JUCO eligibility should not, or those 2 years he spent there at a junior college should not count against his 4 years of eligibility with the NCAA for his D1 eligibility. And part of the reason they want this temporary restraining order is because the portal opens on December 9th, and he's got to make some decisions about what his future looks like. And, of course, now, again, with his stock rising, he wants an NIL deal. He'd be eligible for that, whether that's for another year with Vanderbilt or maybe with another school. And so he's fighting for an opportunity to have that. So we'll see how it plays out.
On the rundown, I have a second link, which is an update to the story. Preston, do you want to handle this one?
Yeah, so what's happened is his temporary restraining order was, in fact, denied. The judge said, no, we're not going to address that right now. You can play throughout the season. And it is interesting that the NCAA, he's subject to NCAA rules because he is playing, Division I NCAA now, but JUCO, junior colleges, are not under the NCAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association. So he's claiming, no, I should get an extra year of eligibility, and that's a big deal to him because, number one, he'd get the NIL money, and otherwise maybe he could enter the draft. But he's got to make a decision. But what the court says, we will fast-track this because if it just laid out in litigation and went on for a year and a half, well, time is lost. So they're going to fast-track this to decide if a preliminary injunction will be in place. The injunction would be saying, hey, the NCAA, you do not get to enforce this rule because it violates antitrust. The Sherman Act that's being used all the time, he's saying it's unfair competition that I don't get to, now use my ability to pursue NIL deals simply because of this rule you're putting in place on my JUCO eligibility, impacting my ability to play another year.
All right, moving over to a story with Nike winning their Air Jordan trademark case. But what, $4 million in damages? Is that what we're looking at here? The space is yours.
Not even close to $4 million in damages. That's what Nike wanted. But this grows out of a guy in his apartment in New Jersey who was buying off-brand Nikes. I mean, these ones that are being produced in other countries at pennies on the dollar. He was buying them, and he was using his artistic. I mean, they clearly look like Air Jordan 1s or Nike Air or Air Force or whatever. They clearly looked like them. But what he was doing is he was doing something similar to this company, Bape, and he was kind of getting rid of the swoosh, putting on his own design, using artistic design. And he was showing up at trade shows and really pushing these items. And, well, guess what? Nike caught wind of it. And these brands, I mean, they've got to try hard to protect their brands because of all the bootlegging and counterfeiting going out there. And he was even on a video. He was, claiming, hey, look what I'm doing. This is great. And he was changing his artistic view and kind of representing what he does. And what Nike did, well, they sent this guy, he called his group the Air Global, which using the Air isn't really smart because he identifies with Air Jordan. And they sent him a cease and desist letter, but as part of the cease and desist letter, they wanted to know what he'd sold, what money he'd made, what his inventory was, and more importantly, he wanted to know where this manufacturer was that he was getting. And he complied with them a little bit and shared some information, but kept selling the shoes. So Nike sues him, and a guy in his apartment in New Jersey selling shoes, he didn't go hire a big law firm to defend him, and he ended up not answering, and Nike ended up winning this by default. The court said, yeah, we're going to agree with you. You complied with a lot of things. You didn't sit on this. The minute you knew about it, you came in, and we can see that, designs, there could be confusion in the marketplace, and all of these things lined up. So they agreed with Nike, and Nike said they threw a figure out there, $4 million, and the judge said, no, hold the phone. You haven't proven that. So they awarded him a little bit of attorney's fees and the filing fee, which was just under $3,000. And the judge said, you can have a chance to come in and show if you really did have any damages. And I don't know if Nike's going to be able to do that, but I think our guy at Air Global is probably going to have to stop selling his shoes.
All right, Garrett, you're up, buddy.
Well, it's just something we've talked before a lot on this show with you, Spence, and that is, you can win your case, you can bring your case and win it, but you ultimately have got to prove damages, and Nike hasn't done that yet, but it looks like they still have a chance to do it.
Final one for today, I believe, is also in the licensing space. So it's jury selection for a trademark trial. Penn State against what's called the Vintage brand, which is an online retailer of a bunch of different things. So looks like it's kind of a similar story, but this is the final one. So you guys fill us in.
Yeah, it's a little similar. I mean, but what Vintage Brand does is they sell this merchandise, and they, with their name, they do vintage artwork, I guess I'll call it. They're not going to call them logos, but it could be. So, for example, with Penn State, it could be the artwork off of a program from a game in the 1960s or something, or off of an old ticket or something like that. And so it, at first glance, it looks like it says Penn State on it. It says Penn State colors. And so they're selling these clothes, and Penn State and a lot of other universities have sued Vintage Brands and said, "Whoa, you can't do this. These are trademarked items, and it's creating confusion with consumers." And so this is, I mean, it's going to be headed to trial, as you mentioned, and a jury's being selected for the case, and they've got a lot of defenses. Vintage does is they're saying, "Hey, we're not using your actual logo that these are old, it's artwork, it's vintage, and some of these items are in the public domain." And so it, will be a big case for a lot of universities in particular to watch and see what happens.
All right, Preston, final word is yours.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You first hear this and think, you can't do that. And then the article that we read and looked at, it presents what the Penn State logos that we are very familiar with. And you see that, that's Penn State. Yeah, it's Penn State. And then it shows the logos that these vintage logos they're using. And other than the colors and something that says Penn State on it, you would never identify that as Penn State, truthfully. So, but they're claiming it creates confusion in the marketplace, and their argument is that you're taking a free ride on the fame that we've created. But another thing I think a defense that Vintage has is they actually put a disclaimer on there saying these are not licensed Penn State products. They even put it out there so the consumer buying that knows that, but I'm sure they cost less than regular stuff that you'd buy at the bookstore, things that were authorized by Penn State. So it will be interesting to see, if there's a floodgate here of this type thing being allowed or if it's going to be shut down.
All right, gentlemen, before I set you loose on this Thursday, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Well, yeah, we'd love to help any of the listeners out there with any legal questions that they have, especially in the area of personal injury, which is what we do. You can reach us at 801-264-6677 or go to our website, handylawutah.com.
Thanks so much for the time, and even though it gets harder and harder every week, we have to keep saying it. Go Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.
There they are. Check them out, Handy and Handy. Best dudes, man. If you have any legal questions, call and chat with them. All right, before we catch a break, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. Internet solution, wireless solution, cable television solutions, all more affordable than what you're paying right now. It's time to save money by dialing 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
It is time to save money. And, guys, if you thought about calling on a day, this is the day you want to call because I have the stacked offer, and it goes away today. Stacked offer is you sign up, you get the 2-year promotion, 2 years of the credits. Price is guaranteed not to change. That's a big one. We'll throw in the movie channels, and you get the multi-sports pack, which includes the NFL Red Zone free for a year. And then what's stacked on that is I have the Netflix offer. Guys, you want to watch the Tyson fight? Well, we can get you set up, get you installed in time to watch the fight. Plus, we'll get you Netflix free for 2 years. Now, if you're an existing Netflix customer, it works for you also. You know how much this is worth, well over $370. Call us up, and this is the ad-free one. Dish doesn't want you to watch commercials. The Hopper is the only receiver out there, DVR out there, that will auto-hop commercials. It's got so many great features, and we want to dial you up with the best. Plus, the streaming services are built into the system. Netflix is like a channel on Dish, and that's why they're doing this promotion. Simple and easy. Call us up. Take advantage of that. You'll see savings, big savings, 60 or 70 actually. It's more like 70 to 100 plus dollars a month is what we see a lot of customers get. Plus, we can help on your internet. I've got a half a dozen internet providers out there. If you just saw a big rate increase on your internet, especially on fiber, call us. We may be able to get you the same fiber, just pay a different provider and pay 20% less. And it's the same thing in the mobile cell phone world. Boost is building out this 5G network, and they have these awesome plans. They're using the cell towers of the biggest wireless provider in America. You probably know who they are. They begin with the first letter of the alphabet. You can use the same cell towers you're currently using, switch to a different provider, pay $30 a month less, get a brand new iPhone 16 Pro or a new Samsung S24 free, and get a new one each year, and you're going to get unlimited talk, text, hotspot, all the good stuff. Call us and let us hook you up. 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
All righty, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. We've got 3 hours down. We've got 1 hour to go on this Wednesday. 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next, right here on ESPN 700. All righty, what's going on? It is time for your commute home on this Wednesday afternoon. The Drive at 5 is brought to you by our friends at LHM Ford. Larry H. Miller and Draper, the Ford King, Utah's #1 volume Ford dealer, and they're going to beat any trade-in price in town by $750 anytime, any day. Find them online at lhmforddraper.com. Been a busy show on this Wednesday afternoon. Chilly night outside, little November Salt Lake City night, and you're halfway through that work week. You're one day closer to the weekend. You're one day closer to football. It's Thursday night football. Of course, we are your home of Thursday night football. We're your home of the NFL here in the market. So tomorrow, you're going to get a little Commanders and Eagles after we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. Philadelphia, 3.5-point favor. That over-under is 48.5. I can't believe it's Week 11, but it is upon us. And, of course, a massive weekend ahead in college football. It's kind of taken most of the bandwidth on the show today. We've had a lot of college football guests. It's the NBA Cup tonight. I know, guys. I know. Everyone calm down. But, of course, a lot of the conversation today has been about the second iteration of the CFP rankings that were released last night, right after we said goodnight, where Brigham Young finds themselves coming in at number 6. So I thought there would be 7. That was my guess yesterday after coming in at 9 last week with the first iteration of the CFP. But both BYU and Indiana move up 3 spots after, quite frankly, a couple of underwhelming wins and not certainly near their best performances. Indiana was not good in the second half against Michigan. They barely survived, and BYU needed, quite frankly, a myriad of miracles to keep their undefeated season alive. But they do stay undefeated. Of course, they're one of 3 P4 undefeated programs, Oregon being the other. Army cracks the top 25 this week. They're 9-0. They're now at number 24. Colorado, Utah's opponent, comes in at number 17 last night. K-State is at 16. Georgia with their second loss, not straight loss, second loss overall. They fall 9 spots all the way down to 12. And there are a lot of people that still believe Georgia's the most talented football team in the country, but they've got a game against Tennessee coming up in Athens this weekend, and that is a elimination game, quite frankly. I don't buy the whole 3-loss SEC team in the postseason, in the expanded 12-team CFP. Of course, we'll see what happens. But you have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana all in the top 5. You got 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5. Texas comes in at number 3. Of course, they're 8-1. But Oregon, best team in the country. BYU coming in at 6. The top 10 is rounded out like this: Tennessee, Notre Dame, Miami, and Alabama. Ole Miss takes a big jump after their win over Georgia. And Miami, who lost for the first time, drops 5 spots all the way to 9. So what does all that mean? Well, obviously the disclaimer needs to be we have to wait and see what happens. Of course, nobody knows. And certainly this season in college football has been as chaotic as any, where every weekend one of the big dogs seems to get knocked off and, one of the lower teams rises up and creates chaos in the world of college football. Well, from a BYU standpoint, coming in at 6, in my opinion, means that there is a scenario on the table where Brigham Young makes it into the 12-team CFP without winning the Big 12. Now, it's not a guarantee, but 9 last week, in my opinion, and we talked about it last week, was a damning indictment on the Big 12 Conference as a whole. It was the committee sending a message that even though you have not lost a game, you still have to win your conference if you want to make it in. And rising up 3 spots after their win over the Utes on Saturday night here in Salt Lake seems to indicate, and this is predicated on what Colorado does, okay? So this is not a popular Utah football segment right now because Utah plays Colorado coming up on Saturday. By the way, in case you missed it, Utah is now an 11.5-point underdog. When the news became official last night via Coach Witt that Brandon Rose is indeed lost for the season. So in case you missed that, now Utah is down QB1 and Cameron Rising, QB2 and Brandon Rose, depending on how you define that position, because once upon a time it was Isaac Wilson's. Well, the job is now Isaac Wilson's, and Vegas does not like Utah's chances if Isaac Wilson's under center. It's not a knock on him. I'm just telling you what the line says because it moved pretty quickly towards Colorado at 11.5. The other thing that moved was the over-under. It moved down when the announcement was made that Isaac was going to be under center. It's now at 45.5. I think it opened up at 49.5 or maybe even 50 because Colorado is a high-powered offensive team. But Vegas is telling us, and the betting markets are telling us, what people who actually look into these things believe is that Colorado is not just a little bit better than Utah. They're a lot better than Utah because you get that 3-point built-in advantage. If you add the 3 to the 11.5, that's both Vegas and then the markets telling us Colorado is 2 touchdowns better than the Utes coming up on Saturday. It also tells us they don't believe that Utah can move the football with Isaac Wilson under center. So I know it's not a super popular Utah football segment, but from a BYU standpoint, I think what you have to hope, first of all, you got to handle your business. Period. End of story. You've got to win your final 3 games. So Kansas is the opponent. It's going to be a late kick at LaVell Edwards Stadium at about 8:15 Mountain Time on ESPN. That line has moved the way of the Jayhawks. Opened up at BYU as a 3-point favorite. The over-under is 56.5, so it should be an entertaining game. But as of now, BYU is a 2.5-point favorite over the Jayhawks, who started the year atrociously and have rebounded over the past 3 weeks to play some really good football. They hung 42 on Houston, and you can say Houston isn't very good. Probably not the take that you want to spout around here. Houston beat Utah. They've had some other good wins, and Kansas hangs 42 on them. They probably should have won in Manhattan against K-State, but they lost 29-27. Then they hung 45 on Iowa State. So they roll into BYU, roll into Provo to play BYU on Saturday night, really with a bit of confidence. And I'm not saying trap game. I'm done saying that with BYU because they seem to answer every question that's thrown at them. But with that line being 2.5, that's a little tenuous. But then it's a tricky game on the road at Arizona State, who's probably been the most surprising team in league, 4-2 in Big 12, 7-2 overall. My guess is BYU might even be a slight underdog, depending on what happens this week. And then, of course, you have to beat Houston and Provo. So ultimately, if BYU handles their business and if Colorado handles their business, okay, and Colorado at this point is actually the Vegas favorite to win the Big 12, their schedule down the stretch goes like this. It's so funny when we're looking at these schedules at this point in the season because I can remember pulling up Colorado's schedule and going, oh, dude, down the stretch, they're screwed. Because they have Utah at home, then they're on the road to Kansas. Their final game is Oklahoma State at home, who has not won a conference game. They're 0-7. So to start the year, anybody who covers the conference and follows the conference believed that the final portion of Colorado's schedule was going to be a bear, and it doesn't look like that's going to be the case at all. So if Colorado, who at this point is the only one-loss team in the conference, handles their business, and they enter the Big 12 championship game in Dallas with a conference record of 8-1 and an overall record of 10-2, and BYU enters the Big 12 championship game in Dallas with a conference record of 9-0 and an overall record of 12-0, I have a really hard time believing that if Colorado wins that game, the committee leaves BYU out of the equation. Now, I honestly don't know because, of course, there's so much that has to take place. But I think rising 3 spots to 6, when I thought they'd, kind of be hovering in that 7 or 8 range, because I hate to say it, that's not a good win you had over the Utes. I mean, it wasn't a great performance. Again, you needed a myriad of miracles to fall in your lap to get it done, but it's a road win, it's a rivalry game win, and it's a win-win period, which BYU has been able to do week in and week out, even when the odds are stacked against them. A 12-0 BYU team losing to a 10-2, 8-2 conference record Colorado team, to me, now indicates a great chance of BYU still getting into the CFP. Now, you want to win the conference. You want that first-round bye. And if you look at some of the bracket stuff going around, BYU is still favored to have that first-round bye. And essentially, Vegas thinks it's Colorado. ESPN, FBI thinks it's BYU. But we'll have to see how it plays out. You want that first-round bye. You want to make sure that, you have your best shot of not have, you only have to win 3 instead of 4. And then we'll see kind of how the bracket plays out from there. But if you're a BYU fan, I think yesterday was really, really good news. And yes, I know that there's an argument to be made that your resume is better than some of the other teams in front of you. I see the feedback. I hear the feedback. You're undefeated. Your strength of schedule is good. Your strength of record is even better. And you're one of 3 undefeated teams in P4, along with Indiana and Oregon. And let me be clear, the rankings do not reflect the seeding, okay? The seeding of the CFP bracket will be different than the rankings that we have in front of us, a fact that seems to be lost on some people. But I do think that's good news for BYU as far as the CFP settling in with them at number 6 last night. If you're a Utah fan, the piece of news that you may have missed today is that Jalen Glover has hit the transfer portal. Jalen Glover, who could never fully kind of find his way back into the mix, and when he had opportunities, it just didn't look the same way that it did once upon a time for the young man. He has now hit the transfer portal. This comes off the heels of the news that Coach Witt broke last night that Brandon Rose has a season-ending leg injury. Brant Keithy out for the year. Micah Pittman released a video yesterday kind of explaining his reasoning as to why he decided to leave the program. So I wish the news was better for Utah football, but as of now, it simply is not. All right, we'll do a little NBA. It is the NBA Cup. The Jazz are not good. I was there last night. That's a bad team. But a lot of fun NBA action coming up on your television tonight. So we'll do a little NBA coming up next. We'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock on this chilly cold Wednesday afternoon. Keep it right here as you make your way home. We'll take you home right here on ESPN 700. I got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. They're giving away free money. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. For instance, Jamar Chase, more than 79.5 yards. Travis Kelce, more than 59.5 yards. Patrick Mahomes, less than 3.5 passing TDs. It's very easy. Don't have to worry about any of the terminology, and they're giving away free money, so definitely check it out. Okay, Porter, I'm putting you on ESPN. They used to call it I'm trying to think. It was like the hot seat, the 6-pack of questions on the hot seat or something. I'm going to put you on the hot seat.
It might have been the hot seat.
I think that's what it was, actually. I think I'm overthinking it.
I think so.
I think I need the weekend. It's coming up in a moment. The mind is a little mushy. So I have a very unscientific poll of the most attractive male hobbies to potential partners.
I saw this.
There's 15 of them. So I am going to put you on the hot seat. I'm going to name the hobby, and you tell me if it's part of your life. Some of them are just ridiculous. Okay. We'll go 15-1 real quick. 15, traveling. Do you like to travel?
When I can, yeah. Don't do enough of it.
14 is blacksmithing.
I haven't done a lot of blacksmithing, I'll be honest.
13 is weirder. It's archery.
Okay, I actually own a bow.
Who did they talk to for this? Or maybe I'm just completely out of touch. All right, then we move over to number 12, which is hiking, which is normal.
There we go.
I like to hike. You like to hike?
Of course.
All right.
Big on that one.
All right, get ready, ladies, because the next one is astronomy. And our guy in there, the Marianne Williamson of Sports Talk Radio producers, loves himself some astronomy, doesn't he?
I do. I'm I'm doing fairly well so far.
Photography.
Okay.
You like that, don't you?
Got a nice camera. That's one of them.
We move over to swimming. Are you a frequent swimmer?
I'm not really like a frequent swimmer, but I do enjoy the water. I do like the lakes. I do like, hanging out at the river.
All right, let's keep going. Are you into gardening, which is the next one?
Very much have a green thumb.
Okay.
Yes, I have a garden.
Are you a writer? Writer is the next one.
Not really.
Okay.
Don't write much.
Do you like to paint?
Not great at it, so no.
Woodworking.
I actually can work my way around a saw. I've built a fair share of things, but it's not a very common thing.
This feels like a poll taken for farmersonly.com.
I was going to say, this one, if this were real, I think I probably wouldn't be single.
Moving over now to cooking. Do you like to cook?
Big cook over here.
Do you play an instrument? That's number 3.
Not well,
Okay.
so I'm not going to count that one.
Do you know a foreign language? That's 2.
No.
Number 1 is reading. Apparently, reading is the most attractive male hobby that women look for.
Shutting up? Is that what we're getting
Maybe
at?
that's what it is. I don't believe any of this. Archery? What?
I'm on board with a lot of them.
All right. Well, I don't know. Maybe I just need to get more familiar.
You
Anyway,
just need to start doing archery.
I'm going to go buy a bow after the show.
Blacksmithing.
All right, buddy. Before we get out of here, what comes our way in a Thursday edition of the program?
An abbreviated Thursday edition of the program with some Utah hoops on the backside. Bill Riley's going to stop by the program, give us some college football, of course, react to the Holy War, and look ahead to a matchup with Colorado. We will have both Craig Bolerjack and Gordon Monson in studio for a Big O Tires edition of the Big Hour, and then finishing off a Thursday and finishing off your week with a close friend of ours, Aaron Falk of the Salt Lake Tribune.
Very nice. So join us for a busy Thursday show. We'll say goodnight for a Wednesday. Special thank you to Zach Harper, Neil Smith, and Chris Kamrani. For any of the sound you may have missed, head on over to the website. It is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And then for what we do in our space, if you missed any of it, the good news is it's online. It's up there for your digital consumption via our podcast page. You can pick which pieces of the show you want to listen to on your time. The show is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, give us all the stars, and it actually helps us if you have some time tonight on a Wednesday. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Wednesday evening. Drive safe out there, and we'll talk to you on a Thursday show. As always, you can find that right here